Chapter 1383. The Scarlet Fire Ridge was shrouded in heavenly fire all year round. It was said that the Scarlet Fire Ridge had existed since the opening of the immortal burial continent. Although there were many treasures and fire elemental sacred medicines, very few people dared to set foot in it. After all, even Emperor Gu could die under the heavenly fire. Chu Fengmian had been able to easily kill the two Emperor Gu because he had borrowed the power of the Scarlet Fire Ridge. It had weakened their strength by at least 30%. Chu Fengmian was now in the Scarlet Fire Ridge. The heavenly fire was equivalent to a celestial barrier. If there was a safe place in the immortal burial continent, the Scarlet Fire Ridge would definitely be one of them. Thinking of this, Chu Fengmian did not plan to leave in a hurry. Instead, he went to a cave and took out the brocade cloth. Chu Fengmian carefully observed the brocade cloth for the first time after it fell into his hand. This brocade cloth seemed to be the most ordinary one. It contained the power of a celestial being, which was enough to make it difficult for Emperor Gu to tear it apart. Chu Fengmian fiddled with it for a while and found nothing. He closed his eyes, gathered his spiritual consciousness, and integrated it into the brocade cloth. As soon as his spiritual consciousness entered, Chu Fengmian saw countless ancient words. These words should have existed for at least hundreds of thousands of years. Fortunately, Chu Fengmian had read many ancient books before and could understand the words on it. Jiuyu. Chu Fengmian looked carefully and found that the two most important words on the brocade cloth were related to it. They were the words Jiuyu. This should be the name of the brocade cloth. As for the content, Chu Fengmian found that a large part of it was missing. The brocade cloth that Chu Fengmian had now should be an incomplete piece. Who is this Jiuyu? Could it be the person who wrote this brocade cloth? What is recorded here seems to be a martial technique, but it is much more mysterious than a martial technique. When Chu Fengmian saw this roll of brocade cloth, his eyes flashed with a bit of confusion. Suddenly, he felt a wave of spiritual energy appear in his spatial ring. This is? Chu Fengmian opened the empty ring and searched it for a while. Only then did he discover that the spiritual energy fluctuation was actually transmitted from the treasure map in the hands of the Riflame Prince. The spiritual energy on the map was exactly the same as the spiritual energy on the brocade cloth in front of him. The treasure recorded on this treasure map is Jiuyu's treasure? Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered. He roughly guessed that this Jiuyu's treasure, or rather the abode, should be coming into being. In the immortal burial continent, many high-level treasures would appear before the appearance of other things. It could be a spiritual weapon, a key, or just an ordinary stone. However, only the warriors and fey immortals who obtained these items were truly qualified to fight for the treasures. Without these items, no matter how powerful one would not be qualified to compete for the treasure. Young Master Riflame's treasure map was one of them. This brocade cloth was also one of them. This brocade cloth was obviously incomplete. It had been torn into many parts. Perhaps, even in the immortal burial continent, some people would definitely obtain a part of this brocade cloth. Chu Fengmian wanted to figure out what was recorded on this brocade cloth. He had to obtain the other parts of the brocade cloth. When the treasure is opened, this brocade cloth should be of great use. Chu Fengmian studied it for a while, then put the brocade cloth and the treasure map into his empty ring at the same time. This brocade cloth was only incomplete. Chu Fengmian still had to obtain the other parts to figure out what was recorded on it. However, even though it was incomplete, with Chu Fengmian's current knowledge, it was enough to see that the martial technique recorded on this brocade cloth was by no means comparable to any martial technique Chu Fengmian knew of. Even a heaven-grade martial technique was like a child's play compared to what was recorded on this brocade cloth. The Heaven Realm was a completely different realm from the Emperor Realm. The Heaven Realm was far from what Chu Fengmian could reach now. Only when he reached the peak of the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu would he be qualified to look at the Heaven Realm. Chu Fengmian put away the brocade cloth and the treasure map. With a thought, another ray of light flew out from Chu Fengmian's body. This ray of light was the ancient bronze gate. Now, the ancient bronze gate, which was originally 100 meters in size, had shrunk to a size of 2 or 3 meters in front of Chu Fengmian. For a spirit artifact of this level, it could shrink to a size of 10,000 meters in an instant. However, the size of about 100 meters was its true size. It was enough to erupt with its greatest power. If it became too big or too small, it would affect the power of the ancient bronze gate. The ancient bronze gate had just been suppressed in Chu Fengmian's body, and its power was constantly being worn down by the heaven-devouring secret technique. Now, any traces left by Emperor Gu on the ancient bronze gate had been obliterated. Now, the ancient bronze gate had become an object without an owner. To Chu Fengmian, most of the spiritual weapons were meaningless to him. Now, Chu Fengmian had at least 80 heaven spirit artifacts, if not 100. However, these heaven spirit artifacts were useless to Chu Fengmian, so he could not be bothered with them. However, the archaic bronze gate was different. When the bronze gate ancient emperor had activated the archaic bronze gate, it had almost cracked Chu Fengmian's physical body. Although Chu Fengmian was only in the quasi-emperor realm, in terms of physical strength, Emperor Gu, or even 9 tribulations Emperor Gu, might not surpass Chu Fengmian's body. The last time Chu Fengmian's half-step, immortal real body was shattered was when he had forcibly used the second move of the primogenitor. However, this time, Chu Fengmian's body was almost shattered by the ancient bronze gate. It should be noted that Emperor Gu had been chasing Chu Fengmian all the way in the Crimson Fire Ridge and had consumed a lot of spiritual energy. When he arrived in front of Chu Fengmian, he only had 70% of his strength left. Using only 70% of his strength to activate the ancient bronze gate had almost shattered Chu Fengmian's body. If Emperor Gu had used his full strength, Chu Fengmian's body would have been destroyed. Chu Fengmian's half-step, immortal real body was the prerequisite for him to use countless martial techniques and sword technique. If he lost his body, Chu Fengmian's strength would drop by at least 10% even if he could regenerate it. If he had known that Emperor Gu's ancient bronze gate was so powerful, Chu Fengmian would not have attacked him rashly. Chapter 1384. When the Bronze Gate ancient emperor had activated the archaic bronze gate, he had probably used less than 30% of its power. Chu Fengmian felt that the immemorial bronze gate was even more ancient than the emperor jar in his hand. Among all the spiritual weapons that Chu Fengmian had seen, it was the most ancient one. Xing Xian. Chu Fengmian studied it and called out in his mind. In terms of knowledge, Xing Xian was definitely more knowledgeable than Chu Fengmian. Oh? Did you get something good this time? After a while, Xing Xian slowly woke up from his deep sleep and asked curiously. Chu Fengmian's strength was no longer the same as before. Xing Xian was usually in deep sleep, so it was rare for Chu Fengmian to take the initiative to call out to him. This is... When Xing Xian appeared, he saw the ancient bronze door with a glance. With his experience, he could tell that the ancient bronze door had an extraordinary origin with a glance. Immemorial bronze gate? You know about it? Chu Fengmian asked curiously when Xing Xian called out the name of the immemorial bronze gate. This thing has actually appeared? What's the origin of this immemorial bronze gate? Seeing Xing Xian's surprise, Chu Fengmian could tell that the immemorial bronze gate had an extraordinary origin. Chu Fengmian only knew that the immemorial bronze gate was extremely ancient, but he couldn't figure out its origin. Do you know about the Warlord clan? Xing Xian glanced at the immemorial bronze gate and didn't answer Chu Fengmian's question. Warlord clan? Chu Fengmian kept searching for this name in his mind. He had read countless ancient books in his previous life and knew many things that ordinary people didn't know. The human royal clan of the immemorial era? Warlord clan? Suddenly, Chu Fengmian's eyes lit up as he thought of an ancient record. In the immemorial era, the human clan was not strong and could only be considered as one of the 100 clans. They were far from being a dominant force. In that era, they were in great danger and faced the danger of being slaughtered. The Warlord clan was the human royal clan of that era and had protected the human clan countless times. The Warlord clan was known for their body refinement technique. It was said that they had cultivated their body refinement techniques to the extreme. It was said that many body refinement techniques in this era were passed down from the Warlord clan. This immemorial bronze gate should be one of the Warlord clan's 5 sacred artifacts. It's called Immemorial Bronze Gate, but its real name is Immemorial Bronze Gate. Xing Xian's eyes flickered when he heard Chu Fengmian's words. The Warlord clan's sacred weapons, sacred artifact. Warlord's clan. Was tens of thousands of years. Very few people knew about the traces of that era. Even the name of the War Monarch clan was something Chu Fengmian had read in an ancient text. Otherwise, he wouldn't have known the origin of the War Monarch clan. Sacred weapon. They're their sacred, immortal artifacts, weapons. Suddenly, Chu Fengmian's expression changed. According to the records, the Warlord clan possessed 5 sacred artifacts. They were the Warlord Bronze Gate, the Warlord Armor, the Warlord Cauldron, the Warlord Totem, and the Warlord Ox Carriage. All 5 of them were extreme immortal artifacts. The Immemorial Bronze Gate is indeed an extreme immortal artifact. However, the Immemorial Bronze Gate before us is not. Xing Xian observed the Immemorial Bronze Gate and said, "An extreme immortal artifact must possess an artifact spirit. This Immemorial Bronze Gate before us does not possess an artifact spirit. Something must have happened in the ancient era that destroyed the artifact spirit. Thus, this Immemorial Bronze Gate can no longer be considered an extreme immortal artifact. However, even if that's the case, the Immemorial Bronze Gate still surpasses countless heavenly spirit artifacts. For the current you, it is extremely useful. The Immemorial Bronze Gate was once a Protector Saint artifact of the War King clan. If you were to assimilate it into your body and place it before the Divine Tree, your body would become even tougher. Lost its artifact spirit? Chu Fengmian did not think of that. His understanding of extreme immortal artifacts was far from enough. The only extreme immortal artifact Chu Fengmian had come into contact with was the Mortal Emperor Jar. However, the Mortal Emperor Jar was also broken, and there was no artifact spirit in it. Then, can this Immemorial Bronze Gate be restored? Chu Fengmian asked unwillingly. A true extreme immortal artifact was completely different from a broken extreme immortal artifact. According to the records, even among the Celestials, there were very few who possessed an extreme way immortal weapon. Only the strongest among the Celestials were qualified to possess one. Of course it can. This Immemorial Bronze Gate already possesses the ability to nurture an artifact spirit. As long as you continue to nurture it, it will one day give birth to an artifact spirit. In that case, it will truly return to the level of an extreme immortal artifact. Xing Xian said casually. Chu Fengmian was quite satisfied with the result. At least, the Immemorial Bronze Gate before him had the ability to be restored to an extreme immortal artifact, just like the Mortal Emperor Jar. Chu Fengmian had already obtained 5 fragments of the Mortal Emperor Jar. 4 more fragments would be enough to completely restore the Mortal Emperor Jar. If the Primeval Bronze Gate was restored as well, Chu Fengmian would have 2 extreme Dao immortal weapons at his disposal. He was confident that he would be able to fight and even kill any Devis that came. When can I control the Bloodbath Demon Sword? Chu Fengmian suddenly asked. There had always been a great fortune in Chu Fengmian's body, and that was the Bloodbath Demon Sword. It was a demonic sword that had once caused the entire 9 realms to tremble in fear. Once the Bloodbath Demon Sword appeared, the 9 realms would turn into a sea of blood. If Chu Fengmian hadn't had the Bloodbath Demon Sword when he barged into the 6 Paths Demon Gate, he would have died at the hands of the Celestial Demon Sovereign Lord. Although Chu Fengmian had only used the Bloodbath Demon Sword once, He felt that its power was invincible. It was truly invincible and looked down on everything. If Chu Fengmian could truly control the bloodbath demon sword, his strength would undergo an earth-shattering change. However, although he'd managed to kill the celestial demon sovereign lord last time, he'd almost been unable to protect himself. If it hadn't been for his good luck that time and wandering to the ancient Fey continent, he might have really died. But now that Chu Fengmian's strength had reached the level of an ancient emperor, Chu Fengmian wanted to try using the bloodlust demon sword. Not enough. Your strength is still not enough. Xing Xian glanced at Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian shook his head. Not enough? Chu Fengmian frowned when he heard this. He didn't feel any pressure using the mortal emperor jar now. He could even condense the projection of the human emperor within the jar. In terms of strength, Chu Fengmian wasn't any weaker than the 7 Tribulations Emperor Gu. According to Chu Fengmian's thoughts, he should be able to try using the bloodbath demon sword. Chapter 1385. Do you know the previous owner of this blood-slaying demon sword? Xing Xian looked at Chu Fengmian's puzzled expression and said calmly. Blood-slaughtering sword demon? Chu Fengmian said without hesitation. The previous owner of the bloodlust demon sword was a famous figure, the bloodlust sword demon. At that time, he had single-handedly slaughtered hundreds of millions of people in the 9 realms. He had killed half of the disciples of the other 6 great sections. In that era, the bloodlust sword demon was synonymous with terror. Later, 9 Demon City and the other 6 great sects came to an agreement and sealed the bloodlust sword demon. Only then did peace return to the 9 regions. Later, when the 7 great sects besieged the master of the sword Dao, the bloodlust sword demon was among them. He perished together with the Blue Luan. The bloodlust demon's sword had been suppressed by the Blue Luan's remains until Chu Fengmian obtained it. When he was in control of the blood-slaughtering demon sword, he was at the level of the 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu. Even in that era, he was one of the geniuses who had the greatest chance of breaking through to the celestial realm. Xing Xian muttered to himself. However, he was still unable to withstand the demonic intent of the blood-slaughtering demon sword. He was corroded by the demonic intent and lost his reason. 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu Chu Fengmian had heard that the bloodlust sword demon used to be a famous genius in 9 Demon City. Later on, when the other 6 sects wanted to annihilate 9 Demon City, the bloodlust sword demon single-handedly defeated them. 90% of the experts from the other 6 sects who had attacked 9 Demon City had died at the hands of the bloodthirsty sword demon. However, Chu Fengmian didn't expect that the bloodlust sword demon, who was once Emperor Gu of the 9 Tribulations, couldn't resist the corrosion of the demonic will in the end. When you become Emperor Gu of the 9 Tribulations, I will give you a chance. Whether or not you can control it will depend on your Dao heart. After Xing Xian finished speaking, his figure gradually disappeared, leaving behind only a sentence. Emperor Gu of the 9 Tribulations? Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered. Although he was only a quasi-emperor now, once he stepped into the emperor realm, he would be a peerless Emperor Gu, and becoming an Emperor Gu would be a piece of cake. The 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu was not far away. Chu Fengmian stood up and looked at the ancient bronze door in front of him. Suddenly, he made a grabbing motion with his hand, and the ancient bronze door fell into his palm. Chu Fengmian's spirit force condensed in his palm and entered the door, carving his mark on it. Chu Fengmian sent a sword seal into the archaic bronze gate. The archaic bronze gate had no weapon spirit, so Chu Fengmian easily subdued it. If it was a real supreme immortal weapon, it would be extremely troublesome to subdue it. After subduing the immemorial bronze gate, Chu Fengmian's mind flickered and the immemorial bronze gate entered his body. The archaic bronze gate landed firmly in front of the divine tree. As the protector of the divine tree, all the ancient inscriptions were activated and blessed Chu Fengmian's body. Chu Fengmian sensed that the crimson color of the 129,600 flesh and blood crystals in his body had become fainter the moment the bronze gate fused with his body. He was one step closer to the undying true body. It's time to leave. Chu Fengmian's figure flashed and flew out of the cave. No one dared to set foot in the Crimson Fire Ridge, except for Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian did not waste the fire elemental sacred herbs he encountered along the way. He collected all of them in one breath. Hundreds of fire elemental sacred herbs were collected by Chu Fengmian and fell into his hands. Chu Fengmian flew all the way out of the Crimson Fire Ridge. As he approached the edge of the Crimson Fire Ridge, his eyes flickered as he saw the escape lights of many warriors and demon gods. There were dangers everywhere in the immortal burial continent. Ordinary warriors and demon gods should not dare to use escape lights rashly. They only dared to use them when they were in danger. However, at that moment there were several hundred streaks of light. These several hundred streaks of light belonged to different powers. However, they were all heading in the same direction. What happened? Is a treasure trove opened? This kind of change was unusual. Suddenly, a wave of spiritual energy surged within the empty ring. It was the treasure map. After leaving the Crimson Fire Ridge, the treasure map began to shine as if it was summoned by something. Chu Fengmian opened the treasure map and looked at the location of the treasure. When he saw the escape lights, he knew that they were heading to the treasure trove. The treasure trove has opened? Chu Fengmian's eyes flashed with anxiety. He now had the treasure map and a brocade cloth. If the Jiuxuan treasure trove was really opened, then Chu Fengmian had the best chance to get it. If it opened now and Chu Fengmian could not catch up, then the treasure map and the brocade cloth would be completely wasted. Thinking of this, Chu Fengmian did not hesitate and directly activated the escape light. He memorized the location of the treasure trove recorded on the treasure map and flew over. Along the way, Chu Fengmian saw tens of thousands of warriors and demon gods flying in the direction of the treasure trove. This was only Chu Fengmian's side. Perhaps all the warriors and demon gods in the immortal burial continent were flying in the direction of the treasure trove. This brocade cloth was a celestial item. This Jiuxuan must also be a celestial. Even if a trash obtained the treasure trove he left behind, he could soar to the sky and even surpass the geniuses on the Great Luo Genius list. No one wanted to give up on this opportunity. It's just ahead. The closer they got to the treasure trove, the more warriors and demon gods there were. However, most of the warriors and demon gods in the immortal burial continent were in teams. It was rare to see a lone warrior like Chu Fengmian. Many warriors and demon gods showed greed and killing intent when they saw Chu Fengmian's strength. In the immortal burial continent, everyone had the opportunity to obtain the treasure trove. Everyone was worth a lot. Therefore, a group of warriors and demon gods came to the immortal burial continent with no intention of fighting for the treasure trove. Instead, they were hunting warriors and demon gods to barter. Chu Fengmian was only a quasi-emperor and was alone. In many people's eyes, he was a piece of fat meat. Kid, hand over the empty ring. Chu Fengmian's escape light was suddenly stopped by a group of demon gods. Most of them were true emperors. The strongest was only a 5 tribulation true emperor. They intercepted Chu Fengmian's escape light in the air and quickly surrounded him. Seeing this scene, many of the surrounding martial artists and demon immortals were already used to it. Such things happened all the time in the immortal burial continent. Chapter 1386. Therefore, in the immortal burial continent, the weaker martial artists and Yao gods would choose to team up or attach themselves to the teams of the stronger martial artists. Someone like Chu Fengmian, who moved alone in the immortal burial continent, was like a piece of meat waiting to be slaughtered. He could only blame himself for being too careless. Kid, seeing that you're still a newcomer, we won't make things difficult for you. Hand over the empty ring and get lost. Oh right, tell us about your fortuitous encounter, and we'll let you go this time and not kill you. Among the Yao gods, the leader of the Tiger Clan Yao gods looked at Chu Fengmian with flickering eyes and sneered. He also saw that Chu Fengmian's speed was far faster than martial artists of the same realm. Obviously, he had a good fortuitous encounter. Get lost. Chu Fengmian glanced at the Yao gods and snorted coldly. These Yao immortals didn't even interest him in fighting them. Kid, are you refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit? Hearing Chu Fengmian's answer, the Tiger Clan Yao god's face turned cold. Kill this brat! Kill! Suddenly, the Yao gods surrounding Chu Fengmian attacked at the same time. Terrifying spiritual energy blasted toward Chu Fengmian. Spiritual energy filled the sky and blasted toward him from all directions. Die! Chu Fengmian waited for the demon immortals to make their moves before he made his move as well. His speed was much faster than the demon immortals. Before the spiritual energy could even approach Chu Fengmian's body, Chu Fengmian waved his hand and all of the spiritual energy collapsed. Then, Chu Fengmian casually pointed his finger. The spiritual energy from his fingertip turned into several rays of sword qi and slashed toward the Yao gods. Crack! The Yao gods' bodies were penetrated by the sword qi on the spot. Their faces were full of fear, and they didn't have time to escape. The rays of sword qi immediately exploded in their bodies, crushing their flesh and blood. In the next moment, they were completely annihilated in the sky. They're disciples of the Lion-Tiger Mountain. They died just like that? How is this possible? This group of Lion-Tiger Mountain disciples have killed countless martial artists and fey immortals in the immortal burial continent. How could they die just like that? Everyone was dumbfounded when they saw the demon immortals vanish without leaving behind even a drop of blood essence. Even though they didn't have a sixth tribulation true emperor, they were still able to push back an ordinary one. Who would have thought that they would be killed so easily? Furthermore, they were clearly able to tell that Chu Fengmian was only a quasi-emperor. Who is this person? Many people in the crowd hurriedly looked for Chu Fengmian, but Chu Fengmian had already disappeared. He wasn't willing to waste time on such a person. After killing the Yao gods, Chu Fengmian activated an escape light and flew in the direction of the treasure. Along the way, there were many people who didn't have eyes. Chu Fengmian encountered 3 more waves of people who tried to block his path. They were all killed by Chu Fengmian in one move. It was no wonder that every time the immortal burial continent opened, a large number of martial artists and demonic immortals would die inside. Putting aside the dangers inside the immortal burial continent, who knew how many martial artists and demonic immortals had been killed by the interception alone? So many auras of experts. Chu Fengmian sensed the auras of many experts the moment he approached the treasure. Those who could be considered experts by Chu Fengmian were at least Emperor Gu. Chu Fengmian sensed that there were more than 100 Emperor Gu in the vicinity of the treasure. Moreover, not all of these Emperor Gu were 7 Tribulation Emperor Gu. Chu Fengmian sensed at least 5-8 Tribulation Emperor Gu. As for the 9 Tribulation Emperor Gu, there weren't any. The 9 Tribulation Emperor Gu were all focused on finding an opportunity to enter the celestial realm. They cultivated in seclusion and rarely went outside. There are experts fighting? Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered. The moment he observed, he suddenly sensed a huge wave of spiritual power. This wave of spiritual power was definitely the result of several Emperor Gu fighting. Even the power of the 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu was present. In this battle, even the 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu was involved. Let's go and take a look. Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered. He hid his figure and quietly moved closer to the treasure. When he arrived near the treasure, he could tell that the treasure had yet to be truly opened. However, the 7-colored light above it was already completely lit up. This rainbow-colored light could be clearly seen from hundreds of miles away if one raised their head. Therefore, the treasure had attracted countless experts before it was really opened. In addition to the news spread by the crowd, It could be said that all the martial artists and fey immortals in the entire immortal burial continent were gathering here. Chu Fengmian's figure gradually approached the direction of the wave of spiritual power. At a glance, it was a valley. All the waves of spiritual power were transmitted from this valley. Someone had set up a restriction array to conceal spiritual power in this valley. An ordinary Emperor Gu might not be able to detect it, but it couldn't hide from Chu Fengmian's spiritual consciousness. He stealthily flew into the valley and looked around. A lady in green was surrounded in the middle. A total of 13 ancient emperors were attacking the lady in green at the same time. Chu Fengmian could tell at a glance that this woman in green was none other than Chu Fengmian's third senior sister, Qing Meng. Among the 13 Emperor Gu, 2 of them were 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu. One of them was 7 Tribulation Emperor Gu. Chu Fengmian recognized him. He was Mu Xian's senior brother, Emperor Gu Fanguang. Among this group of Emperor Gu, many of them looked similar to Mu Xian. They were all from the Mu family. Qing Meng was fighting against the 13 Emperor Gu's joint attack alone. Chu Fengmian could tell that Qing Meng's strength was probably higher than the 2 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu's. In a one-on-one fight, the 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu was no match for Qing Meng. However, with 13 Emperor Gu's joint attack, Qing Meng suffered a lot and was forced into a desperate situation. Qing Meng, don't struggle anymore. Today, you will die in the immortal burial continent. We have mobilized all our forces to kill you. No matter how strong you are, you can't escape death today. One of the 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu of the Mu family stared at Qing Meng and sneered. He released all the spiritual power in his body. Waves of golden light shrouded his body. His aura was terrifying to the extreme. Greed flashed in his eyes. Hand over the item and we will let you die quickly. Kill. Chapter 1387. Stop struggling. Hand over the item. No one can save you today. The 8th Tribulation Emperor Gu of the Mu family sneered at Qing Meng. This is the immortal burial continent. Even Yun Zun can't save you. We may not dare to kill you outside. Unfortunately, you came to the immortal burial continent today. The other 8th Tribulation Emperor Gu lost his patience and snorted. Mu Tiange, don't waste your breath on this person. Kill her. Alright. The 8th Tribulation Emperor Gu, who was called Mu Tiange, showed a ferocious killing intent on his face. After all, they could get what they wanted after killing Qing Meng. They had been scheming for a long time. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to kill Qing Meng and force her into a desperate situation. Of course, they would not give Qing Meng any more chances. Mu Tiange roared. Golden light flashed in his palm. Rays of golden light turned into a long river and roared at Qing Meng. Every ray of golden light in the long river was equivalent to a full-force attack from the 8th Tribulation Emperor Gu. She would have to bear hundreds of attacks in an instant. Die. The other Emperor Gu also attacked at the same time. Thousands of martial skills bombarded Qing Meng. Seeing this, Qing Meng's eyes flashed with coldness. She knew that these people would not let her go today. It was useless to escape. She could only fight. Just as Qing Meng was gathering her spiritual energy, and the green light in her palm gradually solidified, an incomparably huge bronze door appeared in an instant. The bronze door suddenly appeared in front of Qing Meng. Countless spiritual energy bombarded the bronze door. At the same time, a ray of light rushed in and aimed at the 4 Emperor Gu. 2 rays of sword light slashed at them. Boom! The 4 Emperor Gu did not expect the sword light to suddenly appear at this time. Before they could react, they were hit by the sword light and spat out a large amount of blood essence. In an instant, the valley was filled with the smell of blood. Although the sword light could not kill them, it was enough to severely injure the 4 Emperor Gu. Who are you? How dare you interfere with the matters of the Holy Dragon Mystery Plane? Mu Tiange's face was incomparably gloomy. They were besieging Qing Meng, but they didn't expect that someone would intervene. Seeing this sudden sword light, countless eyes looked towards the copper door. Ancient bronze door? Emperor Gu of the Copper Gate, how dare you interfere with the affairs of the Mu clan? Get out here! The moment they saw the primordial bronze door, several angry voices rang out at the same time. This primordial bronze door was almost Emperor Gu's masterpiece. However, no matter how hard they searched, they couldn't find Emperor Gu. Instead, a young figure came to Qingming's side. You? The moment she saw the young figure, Qingming's face was incomparably shocked. Then, it became extremely gloomy. Junior brother, hurry up and leave. These people are not people you can deal with. It's good that you're here. I'll hold them back. You take this thing and leave. Go out and find eldest senior brother. Tell him what happened today, and ask Master Long to avenge me. As she spoke, Qingming handed a copper plate to Chu Fengmian. Who is this brat? A puny boundary emperor dares to interfere with our affairs? Many people looked at Chu Fengmian with puzzlement in their eyes. They didn't recognize Chu Fengmian. Only Emperor Gu of Fanguang shouted loudly. This brat is a disciple of the Holy Dragon sect. He's the newcomer of this batch, Chu Fengmian. What? The genius who is said to be comparable to Yun Zun is this brat? They had never seen Chu Fengmian before, but these Emperor Gu had all heard of this name. In particular, Chu Fengmian's several battles in the Holy Dragon's secret domain had already established his reputation. In some rumors, Chu Fengmian was already known as the next Yun Zun. The next Yun Zun? Mu Tiange stared at Chu Fengmian with a sinister gaze. After sizing him up, an extremely cold voice rang out. That's great. Another remnant of the Holy Dragon sect. Today let's die together. One of the 8 tribulation Emperor Gu said with a murderous look in his eyes. The Holy Dragon sect should have ceased to exist a long time ago. Today, let's kill both of them. Junior brother, leave quickly. Qingming said hurriedly when she saw that Chu Fengmian had no intention of leaving. These people are all Emperor Gu. You can't deal with them. There's no need to run. Today, all of them will die here. Chu Fengmian didn't take the bronze plate. Instead, his eyes flickered as he looked at the 13 Emperor Gu. Senior sister, you deal with the 2-8 tribulation Emperor Gu. Leave the rest to me. The 11 Emperor Gu of the 7 tribulation Emperor Gu were stunned when they heard Chu Fengmian's words. They were all Emperor Gu, while Chu Fengmian was just a puny boundary emperor. How dare he say that he wanted to deal with the 11 of them alone? What arrogance! Kid, give me your life. It's time for you to die with my disciple. Emperor Gu of the Fanguang sect couldn't hold back the anger in his heart. He glared at Chu Fengmian and attacked in an instant. He aimed a palm strike at Chu Fengmian. Countless golden lights shone in the palm strike. It contained an earth-shattering power. An Emperor Gu had attacked in anger. The power of the palm strike landed on Chu Fengmian's head. Before the palm strike landed, the power contained in it was about to crush Chu Fengmian. Junior brother, be careful. Qingming wanted to use her spiritual energy to block the attack when she saw Emperor Gu of the Fanguang sect attacking. However, Chu Fengmian was faster than her. In the blink of an eye, he was already in the air. How dare you show off in front of me with such strength? I can kill you as easily as killing a dog. Chu Fengmian unleashed the power of the battle dragon bloodline. The dragons roared as he stood there like a dragon emperor. Looking at the palm strike in the air, Chu Fengmian sneered and attacked with his own palm strike. Primogenitor's second move. Boom! With a loud bang, Emperor Gu of the Fanguang sect's palm strike was shattered. At the same time, an enormous power shrouded Emperor Gu of the Fanguang sect. Under this enormous power, Emperor Gu of the Fanguang sect's body was shaken and distorted. The surging power bombarded Emperor Gu of the Fanguang sect's body. Countless cracks appeared on his body, and he exploded in the air. In an instant, the sky looked like it was raining blood. Impossible! What kind of martial technique is this? What kind of power is this? You're just a boundary emperor. How can you unleash such power? Although he was shattered, Emperor Gu of the Fan Guang sect was still an Emperor Gu. He could reconstruct his body with just a drop of blood essence. The blood rain in the sky started to condense in the air. It was trying to reconstruct itself. You still want to reconstruct your body in front of me? Chapter 1388. Not good. Stop him. The other ancient emperors only reacted at this moment. When Chu Fengmian attacked just now, they thought that he was asking for trouble, so they didn't care and didn't bother to make a move. They weren't even interested in attacking a quasi-emperor. However, they didn't expect that Emperor Gu of Fan Guang's body would be destroyed by Chu Fengmian in the blink of an eye. If his physical body was destroyed, ancient Emperor Fan Guang could still recover by paying a price. However, if his essence blood were to be destroyed, ancient Emperor Fan Guang would definitely perish. Stop. The 5 Emperor Gu closest to Chu Fengmian were the first to react. They protected Emperor Gu of Fan Guang and stopped Chu Fengmian at the same time. Chu Fengmian was called the second Yun Zun, which they originally scoffed at. However, when they saw Chu Fengmian destroy Emperor Gu of Fan Guang's body with one move, they were shocked. Their strength wasn't much stronger than Emperor Gu of Fan Guang. If Emperor Gu of Fan Guang couldn't withstand Chu Fengmian's attack, they couldn't either. Countless killing moves bombarded Chu Fengmian. For these Emperor Gu, they didn't just want to save Emperor Gu of Fan Guang, they also wanted to kill Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian was only a quasi-emperor, but he was already a threat to Emperor Gu. He was even more terrifying than Yun Zun of the past. Swoosh. Among the countless killing moves, a sword light was the fastest. This wasn't an ordinary sword technique, but an assassination sword technique from the ancient times. It was a killing move. The speed of this sword was extremely fast. It approached Chu Fengmian in an instant and directly slashed at his throat. You want to play sword technique with me? Chu Fengmian's lips curled into a disdainful smile when he saw this sword light. Assassination sword technique is just a side branch. How dare you show off in front of me? Break. The ancestral dragon supreme sword in Chu Fengmian's hand was immediately unsheathed. The moment this sword light approached him, Chu Fengmian's sword edge moved. A sword was swung out, followed by a stab. They faced each other in the air, and a kacha sound was heard. The assassin's sword was shattered in the air, inch by inch. If I want to kill someone, no one can stop me. All of you die. Chu Fengmian swung his sword and unsheathed the Titanic Crescent sword. The Titanic Crescent sword's light enveloped Chu Fengmian. Faced with the combined attacks of the remaining Emperor Gu, the 2 spiritual swords in his hands slashed out at the same time. Break. Rumble. In the face of these 2 sword lights, all the killing moves were broken and shattered in the air. At the same time, the 2 sword lights shattered the spiritual energy in front of Emperor Gu of Fan Guang. What? What kind of power is this? Our alliance was broken by this guy? Is this the power that a quasi-emperor could possibly possess? Countless Emperor Gu of Fan Guang's group were stunned when they saw the 2 sword lights shatter their countless killing moves. Under their combined attacks, even a 7 calamities Emperor Gu would die. They didn't expect Chu Fengmian to resolve their attacks so easily. Attack with all your might. We can't give this guy any more chances. Emperor Gu of Fan Guang's group, who didn't attack Chu Fengmian, just now seemed to have woken up from a dream. They roared, gathered their spiritual energy, and launched a thunderous attack on Chu Fengmian. Destroy. Chu Fengmian roared. 2 sword lights struck out in the air. The power that Emperor Gu had just accumulated was shattered in the face of these 2 sword lights. At the same time, Chu Fengmian looked at Emperor Gu of Fan Guang. Die. As soon as he said the word die, the sword light was unsheathed. A sword light shot out and turned into millions of sword lights, enveloping Emperor Gu of Fan Guang's incomplete body. Countless sword lights slashed out. Boom. Under the countless sword lights, Emperor Gu of Fan Guang's newly formed body was shattered once again. This time, his blood essence was destroyed on the spot by the golden light. Emperor Gu of Fanguang was killed on the spot without leaving a single drop of blood essence behind. The destruction of all his blood essence meant that he was Emperor Gu of Fanguang. Emperor Gu of Fanguang had fallen. Emperor Gu of Fanguang had dominated the Daluo star domain for thousands of years. Who would have thought that he would die at the hands of a quasi-emperor? Emperor Gu of Fanguang has fallen. The other Emperor Gu of Fanguang wanted to protect Emperor Gu of Fanguang so that he could reform his body. However, Chu Fengmian had acted so quickly. This casual sword strike had destroyed Emperor Gu of Fanguang's blood essence. Emperor Gu of Fanguang couldn't imagine that he would die at the hands of a quasi-emperor even before he died. What kind of sword technique is this? It's so powerful. Qing Meng, who was fighting with Mu Tiange and another Emperor Gu of the Eight Tribulations, smelled the scent of blood. She happened to see Chu Fengmian kill Emperor Gu of Fanguang. This was an Emperor Gu. Chu Fengmian had even killed one of the 11 Emperor Gu of Fanguang's group. This kind of strength was much more terrifying than an ordinary Emperor Gu. Even someone like Elder Sword Bone might not have such strength. Good junior brother has endless potential in the future. You have even more potential than eldest senior brother. You're only at the quasi-emperor realm, but you're already so terrifying. Once you step into the Emperor Gu realm, you'll definitely be a peerless Emperor Gu. Qing Meng was overjoyed when she saw this scene. Killing intent flashed across her eyes. She was originally a little worried, but now that she saw Chu Fengmian kill Emperor Gu of Fanguang, she was no longer worried. Even if Chu Fengmian couldn't kill the 10 Emperor Gu today, it wouldn't be a problem for him to deal with them for a while. The outcome of today's battle would be completely different. Sudden appearance of green light. Condense into a divine sword. Qing Meng let out a long roar. Killing intent flashed across her eyes. The green light in her hand condensed into a divine sword. She held the divine sword and slashed at Mu Tiange. Without the 9 Emperor Gu of the 7 Tribulations, Qing Meng felt much less pressure. She changed her disadvantageous position and chose to attack directly. Senior sister Qing Meng's side is also fine. Chu Fengmian also observed Qing Meng's battle, and the corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. Emperor Gu of Fanguang's blood essence seemed to have been destroyed by the sword light, but it was actually devoured by the heaven-devouring secret technique and integrated into the divine tree. Emperor Gu's blood essence was quite nourishing for the divine tree. The divine tree in Chu Fengmian's body was now 10,000 meters tall. Although it couldn't be compared to the real divine tree in the desolate ancient sect, it was no longer a young divine tree. However, it was no longer a young sacred tree. Its roots were wrapped around Chu Fengmian's body, making him stronger and stronger. Today, none of you will leave here alive. Chapter 1389. Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, the 10 Emperor Gu's expressions turned extremely ugly. They were all Emperor Gu. In the sacred dragon's secret realm, each of them was a supreme elder with a transcendent status. They were usually respected and revered by countless disciples in the sacred dragon's secret realm. But today, Chu Fengmian actually said that he wanted to kill all of them. If Chu Fengmian was an Emperor Gu, they could accept it. But Chu Fengmian was just a quasi-emperor. He was not even an emperor. Junior, how arrogant of you! Aren't you afraid of biting your tongue? One of the hot-tempered Emperor Gu shouted angrily. Let's attack together and kill this little bastard. Kill. Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, the 10 Emperor Gu were completely enraged. When had they ever been looked down upon like this? Spiritual energy went berserk. Boundless spiritual energy burst forth from the 10 ancient emperors. The 10 Emperor Gu attacked Chu Fengmian at the same time and used their trump card to kill him. 10 streams of spiritual energy transformed into 10 divine rays that could destroy everything and shrouded Chu Fengmian's head. These Emperor Gu did not intend to fight individually. Instead, they joined forces and completely crushed Chu Fengmian with their strength. Even an 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu would be defeated by the 10-7 Tribulation Emperor Gu. In the eyes of these 10 Emperor Gu, Chu Fengmian was already a dead man. No matter how strong Chu Fengmian was, could he withstand the joint attack of 10 Emperor Gu? The 10 divine rays shrouded Chu Fengmian in an instant and bombarded him. The space around Chu Fengmian was crushed by the power of the 10 divine rays and turned into a void. Chu Fengmian stood in the void. Even the power of the 10 divine rays could not cause any change in Chu Fengmian's expression. However, dragon scales appeared on Chu Fengmian's body and turned into a dragon scale barrier. The power of the ancient dragon emperor body was fully activated. At the same time, the bronze gate flew back into Chu Fengmian's body and landed in front of the divine tree. The power of these 10 divine lights was incomparably pure. All dodging was meaningless. The only way was to face them head-on. The 10 Emperor Gu also understood this point, which was why they directly attacked with their spiritual power. Undying true body. I am undying. 1. The 129,600 fleshly crystals combined in Chu Fengmian's body to form the toughest flesh. At this moment, 10 beams of divine light enveloped Chu Fengmian's body. These beams of divine light brought about destruction. They pierced into the dragon's scales, causing them to shatter. Almost in an instant, the ancient dragon emperor body was smashed into pieces. Chu Fengmian's primordial dragon emperor body had been executed by one of the dragon race's Emperor Gu, so it wasn't inferior at all. However, it was instantly shattered by the power of these 10 Emperor Gus. At the same time, the power of the 10 beams of divine light penetrated Chu Fengmian's body after destroying the primordial dragon emperor. Kacha. The fleshly crystals were impacted and immediately vibrated, bearing the power of the 10 beams of divine light. In the deepest part of Chu Fengmian's body, countless ancient patterns appeared on the archaic bronze gate. These ancient patterns suddenly flew to the fleshly crystals. Every time an ancient pattern was added to the crystallized flesh body, the power of the crystallized flesh body would grow stronger. The divine tree was also behind the crystallized flesh body, becoming the most solid shield for the crystallized flesh body. The power of the 10 beams of divine light penetrated Chu Fengmian's body and was completely absorbed by the fleshly crystals. This person didn't die. How is this possible? Even the 8th Tribulation Emperor Gu might not be able to withstand the combined power of the 10 of us. How is this possible? Many Emperor Gu couldn't help but exclaim in shock when they saw the 10 beams of divine light penetrating Chu Fengmian's body, but Chu Fengmian's body didn't shatter. This person's body is really terrifying. Even with the combined power of the 10 of us, we can't kill him instantly. The leading Emperor Gu stared at Chu Fengmian, the murderous intent in his eyes intensified. This person can't be left alive. If he doesn't die, he'll be even more terrifying than Yun Zun in the future. His body has already reached its limit. Let's continue attacking. I don't believe that this person's body is really that invincible. That's right. Let's continue attacking. Kill this person. With an order, the 10 Emperor Gu gathered their spiritual power again and transformed it into countless beams of divine light, penetrating Chu Fengmian's body. They were determined to completely burst Chu Fengmian's body. Rumble. More power penetrated Chu Fengmian's body. The power of the 10 beams of divine light became even more terrifying and bombarded the fleshly crystals. Cracks appeared on the fleshly crystals. Last time, Emperor Gu used the power of the archaic bronze gate, but he couldn't crack Chu Fengmian's fleshly crystals. But this time around, the combined efforts of the 10 ancient emperors had succeeded. Under the power of the 10 beams of divine light, the cracks on the fleshly crystals became denser and denser, as if it would collapse at any time. At the same time, the same cracks appeared on Chu Fengmian's body. It looked like a broken spiritual weapon. This person's body can't take it anymore. Kill. Kill this person. Seeing this scene, the 10 Emperor Gu were extremely excited. They gathered their spiritual power and bombarded Chu Fengmian's body. More and more cracks appeared on the fleshly crystals. At a glance, it was already full of cracks. The collapse was unstoppable. Suddenly, the power of the 10 beams of divine light increased and bombarded the fleshly crystals. At this moment, the fleshly crystals were completely shattered. And like the fleshly crystals, Chu Fengmian's body turned into 129,600 small crystals in the air. This person's body is destroyed. Kill. Don't give him a chance to rebuild his body. Innumerable Emperor Gu stared at this scene with crazed eyes. Without needing to speak, the 10 Emperor Gu had already accumulated their spiritual power. At this moment, they attacked together, wanting to completely destroy Chu Fengmian. Break the cauldrons and sink the boat. Without destruction, there can be no construction. After destruction, there can be construction. If you don't live, then you die. Although Chu Fengmian's body had been shattered, his voice was still transmitted from the sky. Following Chu Fengmian's words, the flesh and blood crystals began to condense one after another. The 129,600 fleshly crystals floating in the air instantly condensed. This speed was beyond the 10 Emperor Gu's imagination. At the same time, they saw the shadow of an ancient battle dragon appear behind Chu Fengmian. This ancient battle dragon shadow was about to fully materialize. Only the 2 dragon eyes were still illusory. This was the foundation of the battle dragon technique and the source of Chu Fengmian's power. Chapter 1390. There were a total of 128,000 drops of ancient war dragon blood essence in Chu Fengmian's body. He was so close to breaking through the first stage of the battle dragon art and reaching the limit of 129,600 drops. However, Chu Fengmian had been unable to condense the last 1,600 drops of ancient war dragon blood essence. Even when Chu Fengmian stepped into the realm of Quasi-Emperor, he did not manage to condense any dragon blood essence. Chu Fengmian understood that he lacked an opportunity, so he took a gamble. He took a gamble on an opportunity. Now, Chu Fengmian had made the right bet. Drops of ancient war dragon blood essence were condensed from Chu Fengmian's body again. On the other side, rich vitality was emitted from the divine tree and shrouded Chu Fengmian's body. Under this life force, the cracked flesh crystal began to heal, and the cracks began to reform. Boom! The left eye on the ancient standing dragon's illusory figure had already completely solidified. Another 1,000 drops of ancient war dragon blood essence were condensed. Now, there were 129,000 drops of ancient war dragon blood essence in Chu Fengmian's body. He was only 600 drops away from condensing all 129,600 drops of ancient war dragon blood essence. The last 600 drops should be condensed the moment Chu Fengmian stepped into the Emperor realm. 1,000 drops of ancient war dragon blood essence did not seem like much, but it allowed Chu Fengmian's ancient war dragon bloodline to begin a perfect transformation. We must not let this boy's strength improve any further. Kill. We must kill him before he successfully condenses the dragon blood essence. The 10 Emperor Gu roared at the same time. With their knowledge, they could tell at a glance that Chu Fengmian was definitely cultivating this kind of secret art. Now, Chu Fengmian's aura was rising almost every moment. Previously, Chu Fengmian already had such terrifying strength. Now that Chu Fengmian's strength had improved, how powerful would he be? The 10 Emperor Gu looked at each other with determination in their eyes. After making a decision, each of them suddenly spurted out a big mouthful of blood essence. None of the 10 Emperor Gu hesitated and spurted out their blood essence at the same time, filling the sky with a blood mist. This blood mist began to condense in the air and turned into a blood dragon. It contained this supreme killing move. It roared at Chu Fengmian and executed a supreme killing move, bombarding Chu Fengmian. A bunch of ants. Chu Fengmian snorted disdainfully. His figure also moved. The sword will of the sword god realm burst out from Chu Fengmian's body. This sword will surpass everything. Chu Fengmian was now the embodiment of sword will. In an instant, the two swords merged and sword chi surged out. The sword chi fused together and turned into a long river of sword chi. It was tens of thousands of zhang long and shrouded the 10 ancient emperors, wanting to drown them all. Each streak of sword chi in the sword chi unending river was no weaker than an attack from the ancient emperor. And there were at least 1,000,000 streaks of sword chi in the sword chi unending river. Strike! The 10 Emperor Gu fell into the river of sword chi. Their expressions changed. They could also tell that they had fallen into a dangerous situation. When the 10 of them joined forces, the blood dragon let out a roar. 2 dragon claws bombarded the river of sword chi. They wanted to tear the river of sword chi apart and create a gap. Blood essence condensation? Chu Fengmian looked at the blood dragon and sneered. Just as well. Turn into nutrients for the sacred tree. Sky-devouring secret technique. Just as the 2 dragon claws tore the river of sword chi apart, a huge vortex appeared behind the blood dragon. The moment the vortex appeared, the 10 Emperor Gu almost lost their balance and were sucked into the vortex. What is this? Sky-devouring secret technique? Why does this person have the bloodline of the sky-devouring beast? One of the more knowledgeable ancient emperors recognized what this vortex was and exclaimed in shock. This vortex is going to devour the blood dragon. Stop him! The 10 Emperor Gu roared in unison. They channeled their spiritual energy into the blood dragon, causing it to grow bigger and bigger until it was 1,000 feet long. But no matter how big it was, it couldn't escape from the sky-devouring secret technique. Devour! Chu Fengmian sneered. He channeled the power of the sky-devouring beast's heart and pushed the sky-devouring secret technique to its limit. The blood dragon continued to roar as it fell into the heaven-devouring secret technique. It was trying to escape from the heaven-devouring secret technique. But as Chu Fengmian channeled the power of the sky-devouring beast's heart, the power of the sky-devouring secret technique increased tenfold. The blood essence in the blood dragon was continuously extracted and devoured by Chu Fengmian. This blood dragon was formed from the blood essence of the 10 Emperor Gu. The moment the blood dragon was formed, the strength of the 10 Emperor Gu decreased significantly. Clearly, they were severely injured. The blood dragon was formed from pure blood essence. Chu Fengmian wouldn't let go of such rich blood essence. Streams of blood essence were sent into Chu Fengmian's body by the sky-devouring secret technique. The branches of the sacred tree unfolded and devoured the blood mist. The blood essence was the best tonic for the sacred tree. The blood dragon's struggle grew weaker and weaker in the sky-devouring secret technique. Finally, it was completely devoured by Chu Fengmian. Good, after devouring all of your blood essence, the sacred tree's power can be further improved. Chu Fengmian could feel the joy of the sacred tree after it devoured the blood dragon. If it devoured the blood essence of the 10 Emperor Gu, the sacred tree would be able to advance further. Sword Aura Unbroken River. Kill. After devouring the blood dragon, Chu Fengmian's gaze fell on the 10 Emperor Gu. With a shift of his mind, he injected a large amount of spiritual energy into the Sword Aura Unbroken River. Immediately, the sword aura within the river became violent. The speed at which it attacked the 10 Emperor Gu became faster and faster. Hundreds of sword aura bombarded the 10 Emperor Gu's bodies every minute and every second. Even though the 10 Emperor Gu joined forces, they couldn't resist the impact of the sword aura unbroken river. One by one, they fell down continuously. Young Ancestor Mu, save us! The 10 Emperor Gu couldn't hold on any longer and shouted loudly. Mu Tiange and another Emperor Gu of the 8 Tribulations were fighting Qing Meng together. When they heard the shout, Mu Tiange's expression changed greatly. He turned his head and saw Chu Fengmian's sword aura unbroken river trapping the 10 Emperor Gu. Never in Mu Tiange's wildest dreams would he have imagined that Chu Fengmian would be able to deal with 11 ancient emperors single-handedly. He had even forced them into a corner. However, these Emperor Gu were the elites of the Mu family. If all of them died, the Mu family would be finished. Chapter 1391. Today, in order to kill Qing Meng, almost all the masters of the Mu family had come. Except for the Mu family old ancestor who was no longer in the world, all the other masters had come. These 11 Emperor Gu were all the elites of the Mu family. The reason why the Mu family could have a transcendent status in the Divine Dragon's secret realm was because they had many masters. Emperor Gu Fanguang had already been killed by Chu Fengmian. The remaining 10 Emperor Gu would also be killed by Chu Fengmian. Even if they killed Chu Fengmian and Qing Meng today, the decline of the Mu family would be inevitable. Mu Wu, you deal with Qing Meng. I'll kill this brat first. Murderous intent appeared in Mu Tianji's eyes. In an instant, his figure flickered and appeared in front of Chu Fengmian. Facing Chu Fengmian, he immediately launched a killing move. Mu Tiangu was so fast that even Qing Meng could not stop him in time. He had already rushed in front of Chu Fengmian. Junior brother, be careful, Qing Meng hurriedly reminded. Chu Fengmian's strength was indeed beyond her imagination, but Mu Tiangu was an 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu. An 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu was more difficult to deal with than 10 7 Tribulation Emperor Gu. Qing Meng said loudly to Chu Fengmian, "You go first. I'll deal with the two of them." "It doesn't matter. I have already planned to fight against an 8 Tribulation Ancient Emperor. Senior sister, you will deal with the other person. I will deal with Mu Tiange. He's just an 8 Tribulation Ancient Emperor. He's not qualified to make me retreat." Chu Fengmian laughed when he heard Qing Meng's words. There was no panic on his face. What an arrogant brat. This old master wants to see where you get your confidence from. Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, Mu Tiangu snorted coldly. His face turned colder and murderous intent surged in his eyes. He could see that Chu Fengmian's aptitude was much more terrifying than Qing Meng's. Chu Fengmian was only a quasi-emperor now. When Chu Fengmian truly stepped into the emperor realm, he would be truly invincible. Mu Clan's battle song. Mu Tiange let out a long roar. This roar was enough to incite the fighting will of the heavens and earth. When the 10 ancient emperors who were trapped in the Sword Qi winding river heard this roar, their eyes were filled with boundless fighting will. Joining forces, they bombarded the Sword Qi winding river, as though they were trying to break it apart. At the same time, with this roar, Mu Tiange's figure also moved. He was less than 3 meters away from Chu Fengmian. He condensed spiritual power on his fist and punched towards Chu Fengmian. Behind Mu Tiangu, several figures appeared. These figures were the top powers of the Mu family and the ancestral spirits of the Mu family. The power of the past generations of the Mu family seemed to have been added to this fist wind. In an instant, it blasted toward Chu Fengmian. Good timing. Chu Fengmian felt the battle dragon bloodline in his body start to boil when he saw the fist wind coming toward him. In terms of strength alone, Mu Tiange was much stronger than the 10 Emperor Gu combined. This was the real deal, an 8th Tribulation Emperor Gu. The battle dragon bloodline grew stronger as the battle progressed. Chu Fengmian had no intention of backing down. On the contrary, his eyes were filled with fighting spirit. 8th Tribulation Emperor Gu, let's fight today. Soaring Serpent Transformation. Boom. The soaring serpent bloodline in Chu Fengmian's body was stimulated, forcibly raising his cultivation to the 1st Tribulation True Emperor realm. Even though it was only 1 level, it was enough to increase Chu Fengmian's power countless times. The 2 spiritual swords in his hands moved at the same time. The 2 spiritual swords intertwined in front of him and shot out a cross-shaped sword qi at the same time. 1 sword and 1 fist collided in the air. Mu Tiange's fist wind was invincible. Even in the face of the sword qi, he never flinched. When his fist landed on the sword chi, the cross-shaped sword chi was shattered into pieces. Mu Tiange broke Chu Fengmian's sword energy with his bare hands. Mu Tiange was the first to do so. That's the 8th tribulation Emperor Gu for you. Chu Fengmian sighed in his heart. Unless Chu Fengmian used a trump card like the Renhuang Jar or the Power of Creation, this sword attack was already the strongest power that he could unleash. However, it was still far from being comparable to Mu Tiange. The sword energy was destroyed. The power of the punch immediately bombarded Chu Fengmian's chest. Chu Fengmian's figure was hit by the power of the punch. He retreated dozens of steps before he could stabilize his body. Inside Chu Fengmian's body, the 129,600 fleshly crystals dissolved the power of the punch. Although Chu Fengmian seemed to be at a disadvantage in this exchange, he wasn't seriously injured. What a strong physique! Mu Tiange couldn't help but frown when he saw the result. Although he had the upper hand in this exchange, he could see that Chu Fengmian didn't suffer much injury. Although the sword energy resisted 90% of the power of his fist wind, it was only 10% of the power. Any 7th tribulation Emperor Gu couldn't resist it. Even Elder Sword Bone, who was one of the best among the 7th tribulation Emperor Gu, would have his body destroyed if he was hit by the power of his fist wind. However, Chu Fengmian only retreated dozens of steps and didn't suffer any injury. Mu Tiange couldn't be satisfied with this result, especially when he carefully observed Chu Fengmian's body. He could vaguely see that there were countless fleshly crystals on Chu Fengmian's body. 129,600 fleshly crystals. This reminded him of an ancient rumor. Immortal real body. I didn't expect that a little guy could get such a great opportunity. It's hard for a celestial being to become immortal. Even a celestial being expert may not be able to cultivate the immortal real body. I didn't expect that a little guy could do it. Mu Tiange stared at Chu Fengmian with greed flashing in his eyes. If he could get the secret of the immortal real body by killing Chu Fengmian, it would be worth it even if all 10 Emperor Gu died today. It's hard for a celestial being to become immortal. Once he cultivated the immortal real body, he would be a celestial being expert in the future. Mu Tiange stared at Chu Fengmian and sneered. Little guy, hand over the cultivation method of the immortal real body. With your strength, you're not qualified to get such a secret. Since we're from the same sect, hand over the cultivation method of the immortal real body and join the Mu family. If you work for us, I can let you live today. You know quite a lot. Hearing Mu Tiange's words, Chu Fengmian sneered. Chapter 1392. Arrogant. Mu Tiange's body shook. His body contained an extremely strong power that gushed out. The power in Mu Tiange's body was simply endless. Behind him, countless figures of the Mu family's ancestors merged into Mu Tiange's body. It was as if Mu Tiange was the overlord of the world. The strong and violent spiritual power merged into Mu Tiange's palm. The power of heaven and earth seemed to be under his control. Suddenly, he struck a palm towards Chu Fengmian. This palm caused the sky to tremble, and a palm print suddenly came crashing down from the sky. The power of this palm was enough to collapse the world. The second move of the primogenitor. 9-domain swordsmanship. Sword dance and dragon roar. Chu Fengmian's eyes flashed with a trace of sharpness. Both swords slashed towards the sky. At the same time, the power of the primogenitor Tianlong bloodline in Chu Fengmian's bloodline was activated to the extreme. The power of the second move of the primogenitor was struck and merged into Chu Fengmian's swords. Tianlong roar and the dragons roared. In the center of the dragons, 2 rays of sword chi soared into the sky and collided with the palm print in the air. An earth-shattering spiritual power erupted. In the vicinity of the collision, even an ancient emperor would be pulverized if he was caught in the shockwave. The primogenitor Tianlong bloodline? The Ting serpent bloodline? The heaven-devouring beast bloodline? 3 kinds of innate divine beast bloodline. At such a young age, you have obtained many opportunities. Mu Tiange looked at the boiling power of Chu Fengmian's bloodline. His eyes flashed with surprise and intense jealousy. 3 kinds of innate divine beast bloodline, unparalleled sword principle, and the immortal real body. Chu Fengmian had all the opportunities in the world that everyone dreamed of. Mu Tiange had never obtained these opportunities. Now that Chu Fengmian had obtained them, how could he not be jealous? The jealousy in his eyes flashed and was replaced by killing intent, an extreme killing intent. It's a pity that you have many opportunities, but they are useless. A quasi-emperor is still a quasi-emperor. The gap between the realms is not something that you can make up for with your opportunities. Break for me. Mu Tiange sneered. He raised his arm again and slapped down again. The power of this slap destroyed everything in an instant. All the spiritual energy was shattered by this palm. It broke Chu Fengmian's sword aura once again and landed on Chu Fengmian's body. So what if you have an undying body? Destroy. The word annihilation. The destructive power shrouded Chu Fengmian's body. Waves of power approached Chu Fengmian's body and bombarded his flesh and blood crystal. They wanted to completely destroy his flesh and blood crystal. Sky-devouring secret technique. Devour. Chu Fengmian's eyes turned cold, and a sneer appeared on the corner of his mouth. Unknowingly, the heaven-devouring secret skill had already appeared behind Mu Tiange. A deep vortex immediately devoured his body. Heaven-devouring secret technique? Mu Tiange had also heard of the horror of the sky-swallowing secret skill. Once one fell into it, one would be doomed forever. His face suddenly became nervous, but after feeling the power of the heaven-devouring secret technique, a sneer appeared on the corner of his mouth. It is indeed the heaven-devouring secret technique, but your realm is too weak. If you had stepped into the Emperor realm, I would never dare to kill you, or even fight with you. Unfortunately, you are just a quasi-emperor today. No matter how many opportunities you have, you can't make use of them. Break. Mu Tiange's hands suddenly pulled the heaven-devouring secret technique to both sides. The vortex formed by the heaven-devouring secret technique was torn apart by Mu Tiange's bare hands. Mu Tiange's eyes flashed with coldness. He looked at Chu Fengmian with disdain. Boy, let's see what other means you have. Take them all out. Who said that I was going to kill you? Seeing Mu Tiange tear the heaven-devouring secret technique apart, Chu Fengmian did not look nervous at all. Instead, he showed a playful smile. Suddenly, Chu Fengmian's figure disappeared from where he stood. Mu Tiange released his spiritual sense and hurriedly searched for Chu Fengmian's location. However, he saw Chu Fengmian's figure flying in the direction of the Sword Qi River. Oh no! Seeing this, Mu Tiange's face changed greatly. He smashed the heaven-devouring secret technique with his palm and rushed over. Boy, you dare to kill them? You will be the enemy of the Mu family forever. There will be no place for you in the sacred dragon's secret territory in the future. Although the 10 ancient emperors within the Sword Qi Winding River had been working together to fend off the attacks of the Sword Qi Winding River, their spiritual energy had been depleted, and they were like oil lamps that were about to run out of fuel. At this time, any Emperor Gu could kill them. Chu Fengmian ignored Mu Tiange and went in the direction of the Sword Qi River. His purpose was self-evident. 10 Emperor Gu. The blood essence of these 10 Emperor Gu was enough to increase Chu Fengmian's strength greatly. How dare you threaten me? Mu family? There will be no Mu family in the future. Hearing Mu Tiange's words, Chu Fengmian showed some disdain. He, Chu Fengmian, was not afraid of threats. From the moment Chu Fengmian killed Mu Xian, Chu Fengmian had never thought of being kind to the Mu family. This time, the Mu family dared to besiege Qingmeng. If he did not destroy the Mu family in the future, it would be a disaster sooner or later. These 10 Emperor Gu were the elites of the Mu family. Chu Fengmian would never let them leave today. All of you die. Chu Fengmian's speed was beyond Mu Tiange's imagination. In an instant, Chu Fengmian arrived in front of the Sword Qi River. He gathered spiritual energy in his palm and aimed it at the 10 Emperor Gu in the Sword Qi River. He immediately attacked. No! The 10 Emperor Gu in the Sword Qi River roared heartbreakingly. They were Emperor Gu. They had gone through untold hardships to reach their current strength. Naturally, they were unwilling to die like this. However, they could no longer struggle in the Sword Qi River. As Chu Fengmian's palm print fell, the bodies of the 10 Emperor Gu exploded in the air. As Chu Fengmian's palm print swept across, the bodies of the 10 Emperor Gu exploded in the Sword Qi River one by one. Blood mist flew out from their bodies. At the same time, the sky-devouring secret technique was activated. It devoured the blood essence of the 10 Emperor Gu completely. You little bastard, I will kill you. Not only you, but I will tear your family and your friends to shreds. Seeing this scene, Mu Tiange was about to go crazy. The Mu family only had a total of 11 calamities Emperor Gu. These were the experts that the Mu family had cultivated for tens of thousands of years. Grooming an ancient emperor was something that could only be done after thousands of years. Moreover, the amount of resources required was astronomical. Chapter 1393. The moment Mu Tiange saw the 11 ancient emperors being killed, he went completely mad. The murderous intent on his body had already completely boiled. He didn't care about anything else. The only thought in his mind was to kill Chu Fengmian. Go to hell. Without hesitation, Mu Tiange mobilized all his spiritual power and gathered it in his palm. An incomparably huge blood-red palm print blasted towards Chu Fengmian from the sky. Rays of golden light flickered in the palm. Chu Fengmian saw 2,000 strands of the law of heaven and earth on Mu Tiange's body. Now that the power of 2,000 strands of the law of heaven and earth was integrated into the palm, the full power of the 8 tribulations Emperor Gu was enough to sweep away everything. Emperor Jar. Chu Fengmian knew that Mu Tiange was going all out. 2,000 strands of the law of heaven and earth was far from what Chu Fengmian could contend with. If it was an ordinary Emperor Gu, Chu Fengmian could still contend with more than 1,000 strands of the law of heaven and earth. However, Chu Fengmian would definitely lose if he fought with 2,000 strands of the law of heaven and earth. Chu Fengmian knew that it was not the time to hide. He used all his trump cards and the Emperor Jar appeared in his palm. Facing the oncoming blood-red palm print, the Emperor Jar rotated in Chu Fengmian's palm. It gathered spiritual energy and the ancient power of the Emperor. Shadow of the Emperor. With the power of the Emperor, a real shadow of the Emperor was formed behind Chu Fengmian. The shadow looked extremely illusory. One couldn't tell what kind of person it was at first glance. However, its every move was filled with incomparable divine power. At the same time, the essence blood of the 10 Emperor Gu in Chu Fengmian's body had been devoured by the sacred tree. The sacred tree emitted all kinds of golden light, which was exactly the same as the power of heaven and earth. The sacred tree now seemed to have the ability to control the power of heaven and earth. After devouring the essence blood of the 10 Emperor Gu, it also devoured their power of heaven and earth. I am immortal! Boom! The roots of the sacred tree in Chu Fengmian's body became extremely thick and strong. They spread across the 129,600 flesh and blood crystals and shrouded Chu Fengmian's body. Sword out of Hongmeng. In an instant Chu Fengmian's body moved. The power of both swords was unleashed, intertwining together and lashing out in the air, turning into a shocking sword light. This sword was simply a sword that could split the heavens and earth apart. It was as if this sword could break through the void and create a new world. At this moment, Chu Fengmian unleashed all of his power. 900 strands of the power of the laws of heaven and earth were infused into the blade as it blasted towards Mu Tiange. The power of an extreme immortal weapon. This is an extreme Dao immortal weapon. Mu Tiange's eyes revealed a look of extreme fear. What he feared was not the sword edge, but the power of Renhuang that appeared in the sword edge from Chu Fengmian's back. The moment he saw the shadow of the human emperor, Mu Tiange felt an instinctive fear and trembled. There was only one kind of spiritual weapon that could make Emperor Gu feel fear: an extreme Dao immortal weapon. It was a legendary extreme Dao immortal weapon in the Daluo star field. Retreat. The moment he saw the power of the human emperor jar, Mu Tiange's figure flickered as he hurriedly tried to retreat. Trying to escape? Tianlong change. Seal it. Chu Fengmian had already anticipated Mu Tiange's thoughts. Mu Tiange had already suffered considerable injuries in the battle with Qingmeng, so he didn't dare to resist the power of the human emperor jar. Just as Mu Tiange was about to escape, the power of ancestor Tianlong on Chu Fengmian's body was fully activated. The sky in front of him turned into a cage. Even an ancient emperor would not be able to escape from Tian's cage. Mu Tiange was trapped in the center of this cage. The sword light blasted towards Mu Tiange. Damn it! Boy, if you don't want me to live, you won't live either. Mu Tiange's face was incomparably crazy. He knew that it was almost impossible for him to escape now, so he went completely crazy. His spiritual power exploded. The sky was full of killing moves, and there were hundreds of different kinds of martial skills. They all burst out and blasted directly towards Chu Fengmian. He wanted to fight to the death with Chu Fengmian. Rumble! Chu Fengmian's sword took the lead and slashed on Mu Tiange's body. Although Mu Tiange was an 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu, his spiritual power was still condensed. However, Chu Fengmian's sword light easily broke the spiritual power that he had gathered around him. The protective spiritual power around Mu Tiange was shattered in an instant. At the same time, the sword light bombarded Mu Tiange's body, and his body began to be annihilated. Under the sword light, nothing was left. Mu Tiange's body was constantly destroyed. At the same time, hundreds of killing moves bombarded Chu Fengmian's body. Mu Tiange had gone crazy. He would rather die than kill Chu Fengmian. These hundreds of killing moves bombarded Chu Fengmian's chest. On Chu Fengmian's body, 129,600 blood and flesh crystals were closely connected. When the killing moves bombarded his body, they suddenly collided. The power of the Tree of God. I am immortal. Chu Fengmian stood in the same place, letting these killing moves bombard his body. Chu Fengmian landed on the ground, with his feet on the ground and his head in the sky. Now, he seemed to have become the incarnation of the Tree of God. A steady stream of the power of heaven and earth fell from the sky. The power of heaven and earth protected Chu Fengmian's body, turning into a barrier. No matter how many killing moves bombarded Chu Fengmian's body remained motionless. Mu Tiange's hundreds of killing moves bombarded Chu Fengmian's body, but there was still no wound on Chu Fengmian's body. Even Chu Fengmian's face was as relaxed as ever. Boom! After the last killing move ended, Chu Fengmian slowly stood up and muttered to himself. The power of heaven and earth. This is the most powerful part of the Tree of God. It can communicate with the heaven and earth. This is something that even Emperor Gu and the heavenly man could not do. After the Tree of God in Chu Fengmian's body had devoured the blood essence of the 10 Emperor Gu, it had reached a new realm. It was like the realm of the martialist demon god Emperor Gu. The reward was the ability to communicate with the power of heaven and earth. As long as Chu Fengmian was on the ground, he could communicate with the power of heaven and earth and use it. This spiritual power could not be activated by Chu Fengmian, but it was enough to form a spiritual barrier around Chu Fengmian. Chapter 1394. Chu Fengmian looked at Mu Tiange's direction. In the air, Mu Tiange was still alive, but he no longer had any strength left. Under Chu Fengmian's sword light, 99% of Mu Tiange's blood essence was destroyed. He could only struggle at death's door, without any strength left. As Chu Fengmian made a grabbing motion in the air, Mu Tiange fell into his palm. Chu Fengmian, if you dare to kill me, the old ancestor will definitely avenge me. Mu Tiange was still roaring crazily in Chu Fengmian's palm. The Mu family still had an old ancestor, the most ancient expert of the Mu family, the Nine Tribulations Emperor Gu. Your Mu clan's patriarch will soon be buried with you. Chu Fengmian's eyes turned cold. With a clench of his palm, Mu Tiange's body was directly crushed in his palm. So what if he was the old ancestor of the Mu family? Chu Fengmian's strength had already reached the point where he could contend with the Eight Tribulations Emperor Gu. As long as his strength improved further, Chu Fengmian might not necessarily lose to the Nine Tribulations Emperor Gu. What was there for Chu Fengmian to be afraid of? Chu Fengmian looked to the other side. The battle between Qing Meng and Mu Wu Emperor Gu had also ended. Mu Tiange and Mu Wu Emperor Gu joined forces and barely managed to fight Qing Meng. Now only Mu Wu Emperor Gu was left. How could he be Qing Meng's opponent? He was almost easily killed by Qing Meng. Seeing that Chu Fengmian had also killed Mu Tiange, Qing Meng's eyes were filled with incomparable shock. She slowly calmed down. "Junior brother, how did your strength reach such a level?" Qing Meng had seen countless geniuses. In fact, Qing Meng was once a true genius, the number one of the great Luo genius list, the peerless Emperor Gu. However, she was still incomparably shocked when she saw Chu Fengmian's strength. When he was in the Holy Dragon sect, Chu Fengmian's strength was not even 1% of his current strength. In just a few months, Chu Fengmian's strength had undergone earth-shaking changes. How could she not be surprised? "Senior sister, you should recover from your injuries first." Chu Fengmian didn't answer Qing Meng's question. Instead, he took out a few Saint Elixir pills and handed them to Qing Meng. Qing Meng was besieged and suffered quite a few injuries. The immortal burial continent was incomparably dangerous. Healing her injuries was more important. Chu Fengmian said, "I'll protect senior sister." Qing Meng took the Saint Elixir and nodded. She sat on the ground and swallowed the Saint Elixir. She circulated her spiritual energy and began to recover. Emperor Gu's healing elixirs were extremely precious. However, the 11 Tribulations Emperor Gu had all been killed by Chu Fengmian, and their empty rings had all fallen into his hands. It could be said that Chu Fengmian had a lot of healing panaceas, and they were all extremely useful to Emperor Gu. After swallowing the medicinal pill, the injuries on Qing Meng's body began to recover. Very quickly, 80% of her injuries were healed. She opened her eyes and stood up. Using the healing panaceas, she could at most recover 80% of her injuries. The remaining 20% would have to be used for seclusion to heal her injuries. However, 80% of Qing Meng's strength was much stronger than that of the Eight Tribulations Emperor Gu. Chu Fengmian observed that Qing Meng's true strength should be close to that of the Nine Tribulations Emperor Gu. If it weren't for the fact that the Mu family had sent so many experts to besiege them, Qing Meng might have killed them instead. "Thank you so much, junior brother." Qing Meng looked at Chu Fengmian with a hint of relief in her eyes. Qing Meng could be said to have survived a calamity. She had almost died under the siege of the Mu family. If Chu Fengmian hadn't suddenly intervened, the consequences would have been unimaginable. "Senior sister, you've helped me before. This is nothing," Chu Fengmian said with a smile. Previously in the Sacred Dragon Secret Realm, Qing Meng had intervened to stop Emperor Gu of Fanguang. Since then, Chu Fengmian had a good impression of his third senior sister. This was why he had hastily intervened to save her. Seeing that Qing Meng had recovered, Chu Fengmian also told her about his journey to the immortal burial continent. He told her about his separation from Luo Kong, the various treasures he had obtained, the opportunities he had encountered, and the increase in his strength. After listening to Chu Fengmian's story, Qing Meng sighed. Junior brother's aptitude is really comparable to eldest senior brother's. In just a few months, Chu Fengmian's strength had undergone such a tremendous change. Perhaps only eldest senior brother Yun Zun of the Holy Dragon sect could be comparable to him. Chu Fengmian smiled when he heard this. He didn't say anything. Chu Fengmian indeed had too many secrets that he couldn't tell others. For example, he had lived 2 lives. Even if it was Qing Meng, he couldn't tell others. Senior sister, are you here for the 7-colored treasure as well? Chu Fengmian suddenly changed the topic and asked. He had also come here for the rainbow treasure. He had coincidentally discovered Qing Meng and decided to rush over. In the end, he happened to see Qing Meng being besieged. I wanted to try my luck. However, I don't have the token, so I don't think I can compete for it. Qing Meng nodded when she heard Chu Fengmian's words. She had also come here because she had discovered the existence of the rainbow treasure. However, she didn't expect the Mu clan to have already set up a trap to kill Qing Meng. Token? Senior sister, are you talking about this? Hearing this, Chu Fengmian's heart suddenly moved. He opened his empty ring, and the brocade cloth suddenly flew out from his empty ring. The power of a heavenly being emanated from the brocade cloth. This is the 9 mystic immortal art? Qing Meng looked at the brocade cloth carefully and exclaimed in surprise. That's right. This is a part of the 9 mystic immortal art. This is indeed the token of the 9 mystic immortal sovereign's treasure. Junior brother, you actually obtained it? 9 mystic immortal sovereign? Does the world know the origin of the treasure's owner? Chu Fengmian only knew the 2 words 9 mystic on the brocade cloth. He didn't know who the 9 mystic immortal sovereign was. That's right. The 9 mystic immortal sovereign was actually a disciple of our holy dragon's secret ground. However, he later left the holy dragon's secret ground and entered the heavenly being realm. He had great achievements, but he died in the immortal burial continent. Qing Meng said. The most powerful thing about the 9 mystic immortal sovereign was the 9 mystic immortal art that he created himself. It was said that the 9 mystic immortal sovereign was only the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu when he created the 9 mystic immortal sovereign. However, it was powerful enough to kill a heavenly being. It surpassed the category of martial skills and was called an immortal art. It was said that the 9 mystic immortal sovereign left behind several tokens. The brocade cloth recorded in the 9 mystic immortal art is one of them. I didn't expect junior brother to obtain it. 9 mystic immortal art? 9 tribulations Emperor Gu killed a heavenly being? Chu Fengmian was a little surprised after hearing Qing Meng's description. Chapter 1395. The 9 profound immortal art was so powerful that it was created by the 9 profound immortal venerable alone. Immortal art was a martial skill created by a heavenly being. Because it was different from the martial skills created by Emperor Gu, it was called immortal art. For example, the 9 profound sword art was created by the 9 profound immortal venerable when he was in the Emperor realm. The 9 profound immortal venerable was not talented, but he was at the peak of creating martial skills. When he was in the life and death realm, he could create heaven-grade martial skills. When he was in the Emperor realm, he created immortal art. If he did not die, countless immortal arts would be passed down in the future. Qing Meng sighed. If the 9 profound immortal art is so magical, I must get it. Chu Fengmian mumbled to himself. Such a sword technique was definitely of great use to Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian wanted to create his own sword art. If he got the 9 profound immortal art, he would be able to learn from it. Junior brother, with this token, you are qualified to enter the cave and fight for the treasures of the 9 profound immortal venerable. However, junior brother, you must be careful. This time, almost all of the experts who got the token are 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu. It is said that Blood God Emperor Gu also got the token. Qing Meng suddenly thought of something and reminded him. He suddenly remembered that Chu Fengmian killed young Master Shui. This time, Blood God Emperor Gu would also go to the 9 profound immortal venerables cave. Chu Fengmian killed Blood God Emperor Gu's only son, young Master Shui. If he met Blood God Emperor Gu, he would not let Chu Fengmian go. Blood God Emperor Gu? Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered with killing intent. Blood God Emperor Gu had calculated Chu Fengmian's location and planned to kill him. Now, he was really haunting him. This time, Blood God Emperor Gu would also go to the 9 profound Immortal Venerables cave. Once they met, it would be a fierce battle. Blood God Emperor Gu's strength is not something that Mu Tian-go can compete with. He has reached the peak of 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu. He only needs one opportunity to enter the 9 Tribulation Emperor Gu. Qing Meng said. It's not just Blood God Emperor Gu. Rumor has it that Songhai City's Shueishin Emperor Gu has also obtained a token. This Shueishin Emperor Gu is also an 8 Calamities Emperor Gu. He is also a good friend of Blood God Emperor Gu. If you encounter the 2 of them, you must be careful. Emperor Gu of Shui Xian? Chu Fengmian recalled that when he was calculating Chu Fengmian, there seemed to be another existence other than the Blood God, Emperor Gu. It seemed to be this Emperor Gu of Shui Xian. Chu Fengmian was confident that he could fight against an ordinary Emperor Gu. However, if 2 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu joined forces, Chu Fengmian was no match for them. Moreover, the Blood God Emperor Gu's strength had reached the peak of the 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu. By the way, can senior sister come with me? Chu Fengmian suddenly thought of this and asked Qing Meng. He alone was not a match for the Blood God Emperor Gu and Shui Xian Emperor Gu. However, with Qing Meng's help, it might not be impossible. At least Qing Meng's strength was not inferior to the Blood God Emperor Gu. With her help, Chu Fengmian might be able to kill the Blood God Emperor Gu. You need a token to enter the 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' cave dwelling. Without the token, even an expert would not be able to force his way in. Qing Meng shook her head and said, "It's not difficult at all." Chu Fengmian smiled. With a thought, he opened his spatial ring. The treasure map suddenly flew out. This treasure map was also related to the 9 mystic celestial sovereign. According to Qing Meng, it should be one of the tokens. This, junior brother, you actually obtained 2 tokens? Qing Meng could not help but be shocked. She did not even obtain the token of the 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' cave dwelling. One should know that Qing Meng's strength was already at the peak of the 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu. She was definitely one of the strongest experts in the immortal burial continent, yet she had not obtained the token of the 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' cave dwelling. However, Chu Fengmian actually obtained 2 of them. How could she not be shocked? Senior sister, what do you think? Chu Fengmian asked. I'll give this token to you as long as you help me kill the Blood God Emperor Gu. As for the remaining treasures, we'll split them equally. How about that? If the Blood God Emperor Gu was not killed, he would always be a scourge. Since the Blood God Emperor Gu was still calculating Chu Fengmian could tell that the Blood God Emperor Gu wanted to kill Chu Fengmian at all times to avenge young Master Shui. If he did not get rid of the Blood God Emperor Gu, Chu Fengmian would not be able to rest in peace. This was the best opportunity to do so in the immortal burial continent. In the outside world, the Blood God Emperor Gu was after all one of the grand elders of the Avalon of 5 elements. Killing him would bring about great trouble. However, in the immortal burial continent, there would be no trouble if he killed the Blood God Emperor Gu. It could be said that this was the best opportunity. With Qing Meng's help, Chu Fengmian had a 50% chance of killing the Blood God Emperor Gu. Even if he could not kill the Blood God Emperor Gu, with Qing Meng's help, Chu Fengmian would have a greater chance of obtaining the treasures. Alright, but I don't need the 9 mystic celestial venerables treasures. We are from the same sect. Moreover, junior brother has just helped me. Let me help you this time. Qing Meng did not refuse and took the brocade cloth. She also knew about the feud between Chu Fengmian and the Blood God Emperor Gu. The aptitude that Chu Fengmian displayed was not inferior to the Holy Dragon sect's senior brother, who was known as the #1 emperor of all times, Yun Zun. In fact, he might even be better. Now that she was helping Chu Fengmian, she was also pulling him into the Holy Dragon sect. In the future, even if Yunzun was not around, no one would dare to go against the Holy Dragon sect. There's no time to lose. Let's go now. Chu Fengmian hurriedly said after Qing Meng agreed. The treasures had not been opened when he arrived. However, the seven-colored light had already appeared, which meant that the treasures were about to be opened. Half a day had passed since then. It should be time for the treasures to open. Let's go. Qing Meng nodded. The two of them turned into two rays of light and left the valley. The vicinity of the treasures was densely packed with people. Countless experts and demon deities stood in great numbers. At a glance, one could see many battles taking place. The appearance of the seven-colored treasure trove would not be the same as before, where only one treasure would be born. Thousands of treasures of different sizes had been opened near the 9 mystic celestial venerables cave. Most of them were one-colored or two-colored treasures, but it was enough to make many true emperors fight to the death. Battles took place one after another. The smell of blood permeated the air as a large number of experts and demon deities were killed. Chu Fengmian and Qing Meng did not care about these treasures. Their target was the 9 mystic celestial venerables cave, the true celestial being's treasure. Junior brother, look. Those people should be the experts who obtained the 9 mystic celestial venerables cave's token. Chapter 1396. Chu Fengmian glanced at him. On the mountain closest to the 9 mystic celestial masters' cave dwelling, there were more than a dozen demon gods. These people, without exception, were all ancient emperors. They stood on the mountain peak, and none of the martial artists or demon immortals in the vicinity dared to approach. That's Blood God Emperor Gu and Adjudication Emperor Gu of the Avalon of 5 Elements. There's also Greenwood Emperor Gu and Mystical Emperor Gu of the Qilin Mountain. The Shui Xen Emperor Gu of the vast ocean capital is also there. Experts like the Lord of Purple Cloud Mountain and Emperor Yen are also here. Looking at the many powerful beings on the peak of the mountain, everyone was amazed. It was rare to see so many powerful beings gathered together. All of them were Emperor Gu of the 8 calamities. They were all important figures and experts in their respective forces. Although Emperor Yen did not belong to the 4 major forces, he was the emperor of a continent and was extremely powerful. The 4 major forces would not easily start a conflict with him. There's no one from the Sacred Dragon's secret territory? Some of the warriors noticed that Qilin Mountain, vast ocean capital, and Avalon of 5 Elements were all here. Only the Sacred Dragon's secret territory was not here. Could it be that the Sacred Dragon's secret territory has given up on the fight? How is that possible? No force would give up on the treasure of the 9 mystic celestial master. The origin of the treasure had been spread out. The 9 mystic celestial master was definitely a famous expert in the Daluo star field. Ordinary heavenly men could only be called celestial masters. As for celestial masters, only heavenly men were qualified to be called celestial masters. The 9 mystic celestial venerable was an absolute expert even in the celestial being realm. Who wouldn't want his treasures? Moreover, the 9 mystic celestial master had the famous 9 mystic celestial art. Under the 7-colored light, the cave dwelling of the 9 mystic celestial master was revealed. It only looked like an ancient stone door. Behind the stone door was the cave dwelling of the 9 mystic celestial master. Looking at the stone door, many of them swallowed their saliva. Just imagining the treasures of the 9 mystic celestial sovereign was enough to make them yearn for it. However, at this moment no one dared to move. That was because the restriction on the stone door was strong enough to destroy Emperor Gu. Previously, an Emperor Gu had tried to break through the stone door. However, the moment he touched the stone door, he was completely destroyed by the restrictive power on the stone door. Not even his corpse was left behind. Because of this, everyone understood that only those who possessed the token would be qualified to enter. Furthermore, they would need to wait for the cave to fully open. That's not right. Look, someone from the Holy Dragon Mystery Realm is here. Just as they were talking, a martial artist hurriedly pointed in the direction of Qing Meng and Chu Fengmian and saw the two escape lights coming over. It's Green Dream Emperor Gu. The Green Dream Emperor Gu of the Holy Dragon Sect is actually her. He was once the number one on the Great Immortal Genius list. When he stepped into the Emperor realm, he became the peerless Emperor Gu. Who's the other man with her? Traveling with Qing Meng, could it be Luo Kong? No, I've seen Luo Kong before. It's not him. He's just a quasi-emperor. How dare he interfere in the fight for the 9 mystic celestial venerables treasure? Many martial artists frowned when they saw Chu Fengmian's cultivation realm. Qing Meng's strength was at the peak of the 8 tribulation true emperor realm. Naturally, she was qualified to compete for the 9 mystic celestial venerables treasure. However, Chu Fengmian was only a quasi-emperor. Any one of the present Emperor Gu could crush Chu Fengmian to death with a wave of his hand. Seeing Chu Fengmian fall into the mountain peak like Qing Meng, many martial artists and demon gods felt that Chu Fengmian was overestimating himself. A quasi-emperor participating in the fight for Emperor Gu was no different from courting death. Qing Meng. Emperor Gu, who was on the mountain peak, greeted Qing Meng when he saw her. Although many of them did not possess any friendship with Qing Meng, and were even enemies, they all acknowledged Qing Meng's strength. Although many of the 8 tribulation Emperor Gu were more famous than Qing Meng's chances of becoming a 9 tribulation Emperor Gu were much higher than theirs. Qing Meng nodded when she saw these people greeting her. Then, she landed on the mountain peak and took up a spot. At the same time, Chu Fengmian also landed on the mountain peak. A quasi-emperor? At this moment, many of the Emperor Gu saw Chu Fengmian and their eyes flashed with surprise. Judging from Chu Fengmian's appearance, it was obvious that he had also obtained the token and was planning to compete for the 9 mystic celestial venerables treasure. It was not easy to obtain the token of the 9 mystic celestial venerables treasure. They were all 5-colored treasures that appeared in the world. Therefore, only one Emperor Gu could obtain it. Chu Fengmian, a quasi-emperor, was an anomaly among the group of Emperor Gu. Little bastard, you're here? Just as the crowd was sizing up Chu Fengmian, an angry roar was suddenly heard. Everyone looked over and saw a blood-red figure closing in on Chu Fengmian. It was a middle-aged man who looked at Chu Fengmian furiously. The murderous intent in his eyes was self-evident. Little bastard, how dare you appear in front of me? Just as well, I'll kill you today and make you accompany my son in death. This blood-red figure was none other than Blood God Emperor Gu. The moment he saw Chu Fengmian, Blood God Emperor Gu could no longer suppress his anger. He immediately unleashed his spiritual energy and rushed over. Blood God, what's going on? The other Emperor Gu of the Avalon of 5 Elements, Emperor Gu of Adjudication, hurriedly asked when he saw Blood God Emperor Gu getting angry. Adjudication, this is the person who killed my only son. Today I must kill this person. Die, brat. Boom. Blood God Emperor Gu roared angrily and channeled his spiritual energy. A bloody aura that filled the sky condensed in his palm. An incomparably huge bloody hand attacked Chu Fengmian. Blood God, how dare you kill someone from the Holy Dragon Sect? Qing Meng, who was beside Chu Fengmian, suddenly revealed a bit of viciousness in her eyes. Spiritual energy erupted, and a ray of green light condensed in her palm. As she pointed with her finger, the ray of green light and the bloody hand bombarded the air. Under this ray of green light, Blood God Emperor Gu's bloody hand was directly broken. The bloody aura that had condensed in it also began to disperse and dissipate in the air. Qing Meng, how dare you stop me? Chapter 1397. Do you think you can protect this brat? Judge, go deal with Qing Meng. I'll kill this little bastard. Blood God Emperor Gu roared furiously. He had decided to kill Chu Fengmian today to vent his anger. Blood God, calm down. When the ancient Emperor of Adjudication heard this, he frowned and said, The treasure of the 9 mystic celestial sovereign is more important. This brat can't escape. We'll kill this brat after we get the treasure. Emperor Gu gathered on the mountain peak for the treasure of the 9 mystic celestial sovereign. The 9 mystic celestial sovereign's cave mansion was about to open. If he fought with Qing Meng now, he would only be taken advantage of by others. Judge, I'll do it myself if you don't want to. Hearing the words of the ancient Emperor of Judgment, the ancient Emperor of Blood God snorted. The person who had killed his son was right in front of him. The ancient Emperor of Blood God had no intention of letting Chu Fengmian off so easily. Qing Meng, I'd like to see what you're capable of. Blood God Emperor Gu stared at Qing Meng and snorted coldly. Let's fight if you want. Qing Meng said without falling behind. Senior sister, let's forget about it. Let me settle this. Chu Fengmian suddenly said to Qing Meng. An ignorant old man. There's no need for senior sister to do anything. I alone am enough. Chu Fengmian took a step forward and stood in front of Qing Meng, looking at Blood Noble. Qing Meng nodded after hearing Chu Fengmian's words and stepped back. She knew Chu Fengmian's strength very well. Even if he wasn't a match for Blood God Emperor Gu, it wouldn't be easy for Blood God Emperor Gu to deal with Chu Fengmian. After all, Chu Fengmian had killed Mu Tiange. Old man? What an arrogant brat. Looks like you're here to die. The Blood God Emperor Gu almost fainted from anger when he heard Chu Fengmian's words. He had seen many geniuses. Even Xian Tianlin, the current #1 on the All-Heaven Genius ranking, had to be respectful when he saw the Blood God Emperor Gu. Even an expert who was also an 8 Tribulations Emperor Gu had to give him some face. Chu Fengmian, on the other hand, kept calling him an old man who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Moreover, Chu Fengmian was the enemy of the Blood God Emperor Gu, who had killed his son. Die! Blood God Emperor Gu suddenly attacked. His eyes turned blood red and clouds of blood mist gathered around him, making him look like a real blood god. The blood mist that filled the sky turned into a spear of blood in front of him. Blood God Emperor Gu's eyes flickered, and the blood spear pierced towards Chu Fengmian. It was as if nothing in the world could withstand this blood spear. The power of this blood spear was no less than a heaven-grade spiritual artifact. The Blood God Emperor Gu's blood Tao has reached the peak. The spear he created is no less than a heaven-grade spiritual artifact. The Blood God Emperor Gu is at the peak of the 8 Tribulations Emperor Gu. Even an 8 Tribulations Emperor Gu was defeated by him. This is nothing. This brat killed young Master Shui and still dares to appear in front of the Blood God Emperor Gu? Isn't he too arrogant? Humph, such an arrogant brat is going to die today. Seeing that Chu Fengmian and the Blood God Emperor Gu were about to fight, countless onlookers retreated and discussed among themselves. Emperor Gu, who was on the mountain peak, retreated a lot and watched the battle with interest. Now that the cave of the 9 mystic celestial venerate had not opened, they could see how powerful the Blood God Emperor Gu was. However, no one cared about the result. A quasi-emperor fighting against Emperor Gu? Or the Blood God Emperor Gu, who was at the peak of the 8 Tribulations Emperor Gu? There was almost no suspense in this battle. In fact, no one thought that Chu Fengmian could withstand this move alone. That's all? Chu Fengmian smiled disdainfully when he saw the blood spear. As the blood spear neared Chu Fengmian made his move. He raised his right hand and grabbed at the blood spear. This time, Chu Fengmian did not use any martial technique or spiritual energy. Instead, he used his physical body to grab the blood spear. Is this brat crazy? Seeing this scene, the crowd looked at Chu Fengmian in disbelief. Even many of the ancient emperors were bewildered by this. Shortly after, everyone widened their eyes. In the next moment, Chu Fengmian's right hand grabbed the scarlet blood spear tightly in his palm. No matter how sharp the scarlet blood spear was, it couldn't cut Chu Fengmian's palm. The blood spear was neutralized by Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian exerted some force and crushed the blood spear, turning it into a bloody mist that filled the sky. Although this blood spear can't be considered a martial technique, it is still a move made by the blood god Emperor Gu. A casual attack from the Eight Tribulations Emperor Gu is not something a true emperor could withstand, let alone a quasi-emperor. How is this brat's physical body so strong? He used his physical body to withstand the blood spear. This brat must have some skills to be able to become a disciple of the Holy Dragon sect. However, this brat is too arrogant. Although his physical body is strong, he is still daydreaming if he thinks he can go against the blood god Emperor Gu. The crowd was shocked by the strength of Chu Fengmian's physical body and sneered coldly. The blood god Emperor Gu's earlier attack was only a test. He did not even use 30% of his strength because he was too lazy to deal with a puny quasi-emperor like Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian wanted to escape with his physical body. There was still a chance for him to survive. However, it was impossible for him to fight against the Eight Tribulations Emperor Gu with just his physical body. Not bad. You are indeed a genius of the Holy Dragon sect to be able to take one of my attacks as a quasi-emperor. The blood god Emperor Gu was shocked to see Chu Fengmian crushing the blood spear. However, in the next moment, an even more cruel smile appeared on his face. The murderous intent in his eyes intensified. However, no one will be able to save you today. No matter how strong your physical body is, you won't be able to escape death today. Boom! The blood god Emperor Gu suddenly moved. He waved his hand and balls of blood turned into countless weapons in front of him. They were just like the blood spear. However, this time, there were more than 10,000 blood weapons in front of the blood Emperor Gu. Each of them was as powerful as an ordinary heaven-grade spiritual weapon. Blood God's 10,000 weapons. Destroy. As the blood god Emperor Gu gave the order, all the blood weapons came down on Chu Fengmian. This was the blood god Emperor Gu's true strength. The previous attack was just a test. Chapter 1398. As the 10,000 blood weapons descended, the air was filled with the smell of blood. The blood god Emperor Gu was like the emperor of the world of blood. Everything in the world was under his control. As for Chu Fengmian, he was like an ant that had fallen under the rule of the blood god Emperor Gu. He could only tremble in fear. The power of the Eight Calamity Emperor Gu was displayed vividly at this moment. The other Eight Calamity Emperor Gu's faces were filled with fear. Even if they were to face the full power of the blood god Emperor Gu, they would be severely injured even if they did not die from it. Even Qing Meng's eyes were filled with worry. However, seeing that Chu Fengmian's expression did not change, she did not take any action. Based on her understanding of Chu Fengmian, she knew that Chu Fengmian was not the kind of person who would blindly endure. Sword out. Chu Fengmian's face turned serious. The blood god Emperor Gu had finally used his full power. With a thought, the World's Edge sword box suddenly appeared behind Chu Fengmian. The World's Edge sword box emitted a dazzling sword radiance. The sword intent of the sword god realm soared into the sky at this moment. Swoosh! The moment the sword realm lit up, two sword radiances soared into the sky. These two sword radiances were the Ancestral Dragon Supreme Sword and the Titanic Divine Sword. One of the two spiritual swords was a sword blade that had been nurtured in the World's Edge sword box. Chu Fengmian did not use the World's Edge sword box when he was fighting against Mu Tiange. Now that he was facing the blood god Emperor Gu, Chu Fengmian did not hold back. The two sword blades soared into the sky. He did not retreat in the face of the 10,000 blood weapons. Boom! The two sword radiances pierced into the 10,000 blood weapons. The spiritual weapons formed by the blood were shattered one by one. The two sword radiances were unstoppable. It was as if they had created a gap in the 10,000 blood weapons. In the next moment, the sword chi burst out and the 10,000 blood weapons were beaten back to their original forms. They turned into a cloud of blood chi and dissipated in the air. The scene left the crowd dumbfounded. That is the sword box of Elder Sword Bone? It is said that Elder Sword Bone has fallen. Elder Sword Bone has died in his hands? Some Emperor Gu recognized the sword box on Chu Fengmian's back and was shocked. The news of the old Sword Bone's death had already spread. However, no one expected the old Sword Bone to die at the hands of a quasi-emperor. Emperor Sword Bone. But now, he had fallen in Chu Fengmian. No one would believe it if they heard of it. A quasi-emperor killing an ancient emperor was a rare occurrence even in the annals of history. However, the sword box on Chu Fengmian's back was the best proof. Old Man Sword Bone's sword box was his most important spiritual artifact. If he wanted to obtain it, he could only kill Old Man Sword Bone. This kid is a little strange. Even Supreme Cloud didn't have such power back then, did he? To be able to counter this move, he is qualified to fight against the ancient emperor of the Blood God. He is much stronger than most of the 7 Tribulation ancient emperors. Everyone could see that Blood God Emperor Gu did not hold back when he used the 10,000 blood weapons. Chu Fengmian was able to block the attack. It was enough to prove Chu Fengmian's strength. She listened to the discussions around her. Blood God Emperor Gu's face was gloomy. He was embarrassed and angry. He looked at Chu Fengmian with a strong killing intent. Little bastard, I have underestimated you. No wonder you dare to kill my son. Unfortunately, you will die today even if you are a monster. Blood God Emperor Gu's body shook in the air. Suddenly, he waved his hand and the word blood appeared in front of him. When the word blood appeared, the sky was dyed red. At this moment, the sky and the earth were dyed in the color of blood. At the center of the word blood, the blood chi in the sky condensed and turned into a sea of blood in front of the blood divine ancient emperor. The sea of blood enveloped Chu Fengmian in the center. It was churning as if it was going to devour everything and bury him under the sea of blood. Brat, even Qingmeng is not qualified to see this blood sea annihilation. It is your honor to use it to kill and bury you. Blood God Emperor Gu stared at Chu Fengmian and shouted, "Destroy!" Rumble. Huge waves rose in the sea of blood. The moment the blood came close to Chu Fengmian, it dissolved the spiritual energy in his body. Everything that fell into the sea of blood would be dissolved. The dissolved spiritual energy would be turned into the power of the sea of blood. What a powerful move! Chu Fengmian's eyes turned solemn. This move had reached the essence of the word blood. Blood God Emperor Gu was indeed a person who had reached the pinnacle of the blood Tao. The power of this sea of blood was no less than the power of the sky-devouring secret technique. In this boundless sea of blood, even escaping was a form of hope. I can only break it with force. The longer the stalemate, the more I will be defeated. In an instant, Chu Fengmian thought of a way to deal with the sea of blood. After falling into the sea of blood, the only way to escape was to gather all of his strength. If the stalemate continued, he would be devoured by the sea of blood sooner or later. Blood Sea. I heard that Blood God Emperor Gu wanted to condense the sea of blood. I didn't expect him to succeed. What a terrifying move! This brat is strong, but his realm is too low. I'm afraid he won't be able to break this move. A few of the 8 Tribulation ancient emperors were horrified. They knew that even they might not be able to escape from the Blood Sea if they fell into it. This was the true killer move of the Blood God ancient emperor. Once one was trapped in the sea of blood, unless one could break through the boundless sea of blood with a single move, one would only be trapped in it. At this moment, suddenly, the rainbow-colored light in the sky completely disappeared. Following that, there was the sound of a stone door being opened. Behind the stone door, the door of the 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' cave dwelling slowly opened. The treasure has appeared. Let's go. Emperor Gu, who was on the mountain peak, dashed towards the 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' cave dwelling in a flash. Whoever entered the 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' cave dwelling first would have the greatest chance of obtaining the treasure left behind by the 9 mystic celestial sovereign. Damn it! It opened at this moment? Chu Fengmian also noticed the news of the opening of the 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' cave dwelling and became anxious. Blood God Emperor Gu could be killed at any time. However, if they were too slow in entering the 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' cave dwelling, they would not be able to get anything. Senior sister, let's join hands and break the sea of blood. Chapter 1399. Chu Fengmian had fought with the blood god ancient emperor because he wanted to test Chu Fengmian's current strength. Secondly, he wanted to fight with 8 tribulations Emperor Gu. However, he did not expect the 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' cave to open at this moment. This disrupted Chu Fengmian's plan. Blood God Emperor Gu had no intention of letting Chu Fengmian go. Even when the 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' cave opened, Blood God Emperor Gu had no intention of stopping. Chu Fengmian did not have time to waste here. He immediately called for Qing Meng to attack. All right. Qing Meng attacked immediately. She knew that Chu Fengmian did not want to continue fighting with Blood God Emperor Gu. Qing Meng's body appeared above the blood sea. Spiritual energy flashed in her hand and turned into a green radiance, slashing towards the blood sea. The terrifying spiritual energy hit the blood sea, causing the entire blood sea to churn. The green radiance was about to tear the blood sea apart. Who is going to attack today? No one can save this little bastard. When the ancient emperor of the blood gods saw Qing Meng taking action, he roared in a frenzy. He pushed his spiritual energy to the maximum and poured it into the blood sea. As a result, the hole that had been torn open in the sea of blood instantly started to close up. Sword out! Swoosh! The 2 spiritual swords soared into the sky. Facing the incoming sea of blood, the 2 swords slashed out at the same time. Chu Fengmian would not let go of this opportunity to trap him in the blood sea. The 2 sword radiances slashed towards the opening that Qing Meng had just created. The opening that was about to close up was opened up again by the 2 sword radiances. From this sea of blood, an opening that could allow them to escape with their lives was revealed. Let's go! Without hesitation, Chu Fengmian turned into a ray of light and escaped from the opening. He did not care about Blood God Emperor Gu and flew towards the 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' cave. At the same time, Qing Meng also turned into a ray of light and followed Chu Fengmian into the 9 mystic immortal venerables' cave dwelling, ignoring the ancient emperor of the blood god. Damn it! Damn it! No matter where you run to, you will die. All the disciples of the Holy Dragon sect must die. I want to destroy the Holy Dragon sect. Blood God Emperor Gu roared and rushed in after seeing Chu Fengmian and Qing Meng enter the 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' cave. Blood God Emperor Gu did not want to let Chu Fengmian go. He only wanted to kill Chu Fengmian now. On the other side, Chu Fengmian and Qing Meng's escape light was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, they had entered the 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' cave. The moment he approached the entrance of the cave, Chu Fengmian clearly felt a wave of spiritual energy enveloping his body. This spiritual energy was so strong that it could easily tear an 8 tribulation ancient emperor apart. This was the power that the 9 mystic celestial master had left behind. Chu Fengmian hastily took out the treasure map. This wave of spiritual energy seemed to have sensed the existence of the treasure map and slowly retracted. No matter how powerful a warrior was, he was not qualified to fight for the treasures in the 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' cave. Qing Meng also stepped into the 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' cave with the brocade cloth in her hand. Chu Fengmian heard the blood god Emperor Gu's roar as soon as he stepped into the cave. At the same time, he saw the blood god Emperor Gu chasing after him. Madman, senior sister, let's not deal with him first. Let's find the treasures first. Chu Fengmian said to Qing Meng. He turned into a ray of light and rushed into the depths of the cave without hesitation. The blood god Emperor Gu's blood sea was more difficult to deal with than Chu Fengmian had imagined. Chu Fengmian would have to pay a great price if he wanted to kill the blood god Emperor Gu. The 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' treasures were more important. Qing Meng nodded and followed Chu Fengmian. She was here to repay Chu Fengmian for saving her life. Naturally, she would follow Chu Fengmian's instructions. The two of them were very fast and gradually entered the depths of the 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' cave. The cave was so big that there was no end to it. With their speed, it wouldn't take them long to cross a continent. However, after flying for half an hour, Chu Fengmian still hadn't reached the end. Chu Fengmian didn't even notice Emperor Gu, who had entered the 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' cave. Behind him, the aura of the blood god Emperor Gu had also disappeared without a trace. It was as if there were only Chu Fengmian and Qing Meng in the cave. "There's something strange about this cave," Chu Fengmian muttered to himself. "It seems like if we want to obtain the treasures in this cave, we have to rely on luck." Chu Fengmian and Qing Meng moved forward in a straight line without any forks. Even so, they were still separated from the others. This proved that there wasn't only one path in this cave. It was just that the cultivators who entered the cave would be divided into different areas. Chu Fengmian and Qing Meng had entered the cave almost at the same time. Therefore, they were now separated from each other. The 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' aptitude is ordinary, but his talent in creating martial skills is unparalleled. His cave should be different from the others. Qing Meng observed the surroundings and said, "The barrier around here isn't something that you and I can break." There was a layer of invisible barrier surrounding the passageway. Even Qing Meng did not dare to touch the barrier. If she made a mistake, she would be consigned to eternal damnation. "Since we're already here, let's take things as they come. Come, let's continue forward." Chu Fengmian observed for a while and found that there was no other path, so he directly flew towards the depths of the cave. After another half an hour, the path suddenly widened. At the same time, a secret chamber suddenly appeared on both sides of the path. The door of the secret chamber was also made of 2 stone doors. However, compared to the 2 stone doors outside, the seal on it had decayed a lot. At the very least, Chu Fengmian could only barely resist the bombardment of the 7 tribulations Emperor Gu. It was nothing to Chu Fengmian and Qing Meng. Break! A sword light flew out from the world's edge sword case behind Chu Fengmian and bombarded the stone door. The seal on the stone door suddenly collapsed under the sword light. With a boom, the 2 stone doors shattered at the same time. What came into view was an incomparably tall pagoda. Chapter 1400. This pagoda was placed together with the 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' cave abode. It looked like it had already existed when the cave abode was built. Even after hundreds of thousands of years of cultivation, the restrictions on the pagoda were still flickering. Chu Fengmian carefully looked around the secret chamber. There were no restrictions in the secret chamber, which meant that there was no danger in it. However, when Chu Fengmian saw the pagoda, he felt a sense of familiarity, as if he had seen it before. This pagoda looks similar to the heavenly path. Suddenly, Chu Fengmian recalled the pagoda's appearance. It looked similar to the pagoda in his mind. It was the heavenly path pagoda in Wuxing Academy. However, the pagoda in the secret chamber was much bigger than the heavenly path. Moreover, the energy it contained was not something the heavenly path could compare with. At least, Chu Fengmian could see that even Emperor Gu would not be able to move this pagoda. Could this pagoda be the martial pagoda? Qing Meng suddenly said beside Chu Fengmian. "I've read about it in the ancient books. It is said that in the ancient times, each sect would build a unique spiritual tool to test their disciples. This martial pagoda does not test the strength of a martial artist, but martial arts. It is said that one's strength will be suppressed to a very low level after entering the martial pagoda to test one's martial arts. There were many geniuses in the ancient times. Most of the disciples today are very talented. If one wants to become a true expert, His or her martial arts attainment must be high. Qing Meng murmured to herself. There's a martial pagoda in the 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' cave abode? Could it be that he already knew that someone would come? This should be the test left behind by the 9 mystic celestial sovereign. Chu Fengmian understood the situation the moment he stepped into the cave abode. The 9 mystic celestial sovereigns' cave abode was obviously not left behind by the 9 mystic celestial sovereign after his sudden death. It was more like a test ground that the 9 mystic celestial sovereign had purposely left behind. One needed a token to enter, and now, there was a martial pagoda before them. It seemed like only those who passed the 9 mystic celestial sovereigns test were qualified to obtain the treasures of the 9 mystic celestial sovereign. As for trying to take it by force, even if a 9 tribulations Emperor Gu came here and tried to attack it forcefully, he would only be digging his own grave. The 9 profundity celestial venerate was a celestial venerate. Even though he had left the formation behind, it was still immovable even after 1,000,000 years. It's said that after entering the martial pagoda, as long as you pass a few levels, you will be able to obtain rewards. Perhaps there are opportunities left behind by the 9 mystic celestial sovereign. Qing Meng looked at the martial pagoda and said with a smile, "Since I'm already here, I might as well give it a try. After all, there's no danger inside the martial pagoda. If I were to die inside, I'd just be forcefully teleported out." While Qing Meng and Chu Fengmian were conversing, a gap suddenly opened in the wall of the secret room. Then, a figure flew in. Seeing this figure, Chu Fengmian's expression turned serious. He didn't expect to meet someone else here. "It's the Yen Emperor," Qing Meng said softly when she saw the person who flew in. The Yen Emperor. Chu Fengmian had met him once on the mountain peak. He was an 8 tribulations Emperor Gu. He didn't belong to the 4 major forces. Instead, he was the master of a continent. The Yen Emperor controlled a level 6 continent, the Yenzhou continent. It was 1 level higher than the ancient monster continent that Chu Fengmian had gone to previously. Because the Yen Emperor wasn't the Emperor Gu of the other 3 major forces, he didn't have much of a hostile relationship with Qing Meng. However, this was the cave of the 9 mystic celestial venerate. It would only take a moment for them to turn against each other because of treasures. 4 treasures, even blood brothers could turn against each other. It was common for father and son to kill each other, let alone strangers. There's actually someone who's a step ahead? The Yen Emperor stepped into the secret room and was surprised to see Chu Fengmian and Qing Meng. He didn't expect to meet other people. Did the Yen Emperor find any treasures? Qing Meng looked at the Yen Emperor and asked curiously. Treasures? What treasures? It's just a passage. When I reached the end, I found a secret room, the Yen Emperor said helplessly. Hearing this, Chu Fengmian and Qing Meng looked at each other. It seemed like they were right. It wasn't easy to get the treasures of the 9 mystic celestial venerate cave. The Yen Emperor had obviously entered another passage similar to the one that Chu Fengmian had entered. Now, he was also in the secret room. It seems like this secret room doesn't have any treasures, the Yen Emperor said as he looked around and saw the martial pagoda. This is the martial pagoda? That's right. Qing Meng nodded and said. Does the Yen Emperor want to try the martial pagoda? I didn't even go to the martial pagoda when I was young. Now that I have the chance, let's try it. Maybe we can get some treasures, the Yen Emperor said with a smile. Although the Yen Emperor was an expert who had been famous for a long time, he was very humorous. Moreover, he didn't show any hostility towards Chu Fengmian and Qing Meng, which made Chu Fengmian feel relieved. Any 8 tribulation Emperor Gu wasn't easy to deal with. Chu Fengmian could kill Mu Tiange because Qing Meng had already fought with Mu Tiange. In terms of strength, Chu Fengmian should be on the same level as the 8 tribulation Emperor Gu. It would be extremely difficult to kill the Emperor Gu. The Yen Emperor's lack of hostility was a good thing for Chu Fengmian. Senior sister, you go first. I'll go last. What do you think? Chu Fengmian said. Anyway, it didn't matter who went to the martial pagoda first. Chu Fengmian also wanted to see what the test of the martial pagoda was like. I don't care. What about Qing Meng? The Yen Emperor said casually. All right. Qing Meng didn't refuse. She took a step forward and walked towards the martial pagoda. The martial pagoda had never been dangerous, so Qing Meng wasn't worried about anything. Her figure suddenly disappeared when she stepped in front of the martial pagoda. The restriction on the martial pagoda also started to rotate slowly. Time passed by slowly. Suddenly, a white light appeared at the bottom of the martial pagoda and soared into the sky. It seems that Qing Meng has passed the first level, the Yen Emperor said from the side. Chu Fengmian glanced over. This martial pagoda should have 21 levels. Chapter 1401. The martial pagoda was very similar to the Great Path that Chu Fengmian had seen in the Wuxing Academy. However, the Great Path relied on a martial artist's ability to fight above their level, while the martial pagoda tested a martial artist's comprehension of the martial Tao. The higher one's comprehension of the martial Tao was, the more power one could unleash in the same realm. Fighting above one's level depended on one's comprehension of the martial Tao. The first level posed no pressure to Qing Meng. Soon, a white light appeared on the second level of the martial pagoda, indicating that Qing Meng had reached the third level. Time ticked by. The fourth level, the fifth level, the sixth level. Qing Meng pressed forward and soon reached the 13th level. On the 13th floor, it took an hour before the 13th floor was lit up. Then, not long after she stepped into the 14th level, the restriction on the martial pagoda began to rotate. Then, a figure flew out from the martial pagoda. Qing Meng can only reach the 13th level? Chu Fengmian was surprised to see this result. Qing Meng was a peerless ancient emperor. In terms of talent, none of the ancient emperors in the 9 mystic celestial venerates cave abode could be compared to Qing Meng. In the entire Daluo star field, there were only a few geniuses who were more talented than Qing Meng. Chu Fengmian could see that Qing Meng's comprehension of the martial Tao was more profound than many experts who were also 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu. The green light was the condensation of her martial Tao. Originally, Chu Fengmian thought that even if Qing Meng couldn't pass through the 21st level, it wouldn't be a problem for her to reach the 17th or 18th level. The 13th level was much lower than what Chu Fengmian had guessed. It seems that the difficulty of the martial pagoda is indeed terrifying. Chu Fengmian sighed. However, the martial pagoda was set up by the 9 mystic celestial sovereign. For someone like the 9 mystic celestial sovereign, the martial pagoda shouldn't be difficult. After all, the 9 mystic celestial sovereign had once created a supreme celestial technique that could kill a heavenly being in the 9 Tribulation Emperor Gu's realm. To be able to create such a powerful celestial technique, it was enough to show the 9 mystic celestial sovereign's comprehension of the martial Tao. Boom! 13 beams of light soared into the sky, announcing the result of Qing Meng's intrusion. These 13 rays of light condensed in the air, and suddenly fell in front of Qing Meng. Qing Meng grabbed them in her hand. Primitive Emperor Pill? Chu Fengmian glanced over and saw an elixir in Qing Meng's palm. It was a famous ancient sage elixir in ancient times. Primitive Emperor Pill. It was said to be the first saint pill in the world that was useful for Emperor Realm Masters. Once consumed, it would allow Emperor Gu's cultivation to rise by 1 realm. For many Emperor Gu, it would take at least several thousand years of hard work to break through 1 level. Even for a genius like Qing Meng, Emperor Gu, it would take at least 100 years. For example, Old Man Jian Gu's strength had been stuck at the peak of the 7 Tribulations Emperor Gu for a long time, and he still couldn't break through to the 8 Tribulations Emperor Gu. This was enough to prove the difficulty of breaking through Emperor Gu's cultivation. As long as this primitive Emperor Pill was used well, it wouldn't be a problem to break through 1 realm Emperor Gu. Right now, Qing Meng had already reached the 8 tribulations Emperor Gu. As long as she found an opportunity and used this primitive emperor pill well, it would be enough for her cultivation to take another step forward and step into the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu. At that time, she would only be a step away from the heaven realm. There were rewards for passing through the martial pagoda. It seemed that the 9 mystic celestial sovereign was really generous. He actually left a primitive emperor pill on the 13th floor. What a good opportunity! When you step into the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu in the future, I'm afraid that I won't dare to be your enemy. Emperor Yen looked at the primitive emperor pill in Qing Meng's hand and said with envy. This primitive emperor pill meant that Qing Meng was already half a step into the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu. The 9 tribulations Emperor Gu was a legendary figure. Even if he fell, he would leave his name in the future. Without exception, the goal of such an expert was to break through to the heaven realm. Therefore, there were very few 9 tribulations Emperor Gu outside the world. Emperor Yen, you're too polite. With Emperor Yan's martial attainment, your reward may not be less than mine. Qing Meng looked at Emperor Yen and said with a smile. Emperor Yen, please. All right, I'll give it a try. Emperor Yen laughed heartily and took a step forward, walking to the front of the martial pagoda. Then, Emperor Yan's body fell into the martial pagoda. The first floor was quickly lit up. The second floor, the third floor. Emperor Yan's speed wasn't inferior to Qing Meng's. This made Chu Fengmian's eyes flash with surprise. Qing Meng saw the surprise in Chu Fengmian's eyes and said slowly, Emperor Yan's talent is extremely high. The 4 major forces have tried to rope him in before. However, he's a free-spirited person, so he didn't join. If he's willing, the 4 major forces will give him great benefits to rope him in. If there's a chance, I'd like to make friends with him. Chu Fengmian nodded. Emperor Yen didn't show any hostility towards him. His character was also to Chu Fengmian's liking. However, now wasn't the time to make friends with him. At least in this 9 Xian immortal sovereign cave, Chu Fengmian wouldn't trust anyone except Qing Meng. Soon, Emperor Yan's speed slowed down. When he reached the 12th floor, he was teleported out. The 12th floor was only 1 floor lower than Qing Meng. 12 rays of light fell in front of Emperor Yen. In his hand there was a ring. It seemed to be a heavenly spiritual tool. However, compared to an ordinary heavenly spiritual tool, this ring had the strength of a heavenly being. Its power was much stronger than a heavenly spiritual tool. This is the 9 Xian ring? Qing Meng asked curiously. The 9 Xian immortal sovereign once had a ring called the 9 Xian ring. Once it was activated, it could withstand the power of a martial artist or demon god. No, it's just a replica of the 9 Xian ring. However, it was personally made by the 9 Xian immortal sovereign. Emperor Yen said with a smile. Obviously, he was in a good mood after obtaining this ring. This ring only has half of the power of the 9 Xian ring. It's enough to increase my strength by 50%. 50% increase in strength. Chu Fengmian and Qing Meng's eyes flashed with surprise. 50% of the power of the 8 tribulations Emperor Gu was extremely terrifying. With this ring, the future Emperor Yen would be almost invincible among the 8 tribulations Emperor Gu. Although the value of this ring wasn't as high as the primitive Emperor Pill, it was still an extremely precious spiritual tool. It was hard to obtain it outside no matter how many methods one used. This 9 Xian immortal sovereign cave is indeed a treasure ground. It's worth it even if I leave now. Emperor Yen couldn't help but sigh. Chapter 1402. If I can challenge this martial pagoda a few more times, it will be a great harvest. The Yen Emperor looked at the martial pagoda and said, there was only one chance to challenge the martial pagoda. Now, as long as the Yen Emperor approached the martial pagoda, the restrictions on the martial pagoda would be activated. Obviously, if he took another step forward, he might die under the restrictions. The Yen Emperor did not dare to risk the restrictions set by the 9 mystic celestial sovereign. The only person who had not challenged the martial pagoda was Chu Fengmian. Young Master Chu has the best chance of reaching the top among us. The Yen Emperor looked at Chu Fengmian and said with a smile. Facing Chu Fengmian, he did not treat him with respect. Instead, he spoke as if he was on equal footing with Emperor Gu. Previously, the Yen Emperor saw the battle between Chu Fengmian and Blood God Emperor Gu outside. He knew Chu Fengmian's current strength. Chu Fengmian was able to fight against Blood God Emperor Gu and force Emperor Gu to use his full strength. Chu Fengmian's true strength was no less than that of the 8 Tribulations Emperor Gu. Therefore, the Yen Emperor addressed him as an equal. Emperor Gu addressed each other by their titles. However, Chu Fengmian was not Emperor Gu, so he was addressed as Young Master. I can only try, Chu Fengmian said. He did not know how far Chu Fengmian could go with his martial path. He could only go in and try. Then, Chu Fengmian stepped forward and walked toward the martial pagoda. Qin Meng and the Yen Emperor were on full alert. They also wanted to see how far Chu Fengmian's martial path had reached. Especially Chu Fengmian, who was only in the quasi-emperor realm, but could fight against Emperor Gu. This was a feat that only a few geniuses recorded in the ancient books could achieve. The moment Chu Fengmian stepped into the martial pagoda, the world in front of him suddenly spun. Then, Chu Fengmian came to a secret room. At the same time, Chu Fengmian felt the power in his body disappear. His current strength was only at the first level of the bone-tempering realm. At the lowest level of the martial path, he could not even use his spiritual power. At the same time, Chu Fengmian's fortuitous encounters and the battle dragon bloodline all disappeared. It seems that only pure martial arts can be used. With a thought, an iron sword appeared in front of Chu Fengmian. This iron sword was nothing special. It wasn't even a spirit sword. However, in front of Chu Fengmian was a bronze statue. It was a bronze statue made entirely of bronze. Looks like I have to defeat this bronze man. Chu Fengmian's figure moved and rushed towards the bronze figure. At the same time, the sword intent of the sword god realm was fully unleashed. A sword ray enveloped the tip of his sword. Crack! The bronze statue sensed Chu Fengmian's hostility and woke up. It threw a punch at Chu Fengmian. However, as Chu Fengmian's sword light flashed, the bronze door was directly cut in half by Chu Fengmian's iron sword. It didn't even have the slightest bit of resistance. The martial arts level of a bone-honing martial artist. Chu Fengmian observed for a moment. The bronze men on the first floor should represent the martial arts level of a martial artist at the peak of the bone-tempering realm. This kind of martial arts was not worth mentioning to Chu Fengmian now. It seemed that the difficulty of the martial pagoda should be rising steadily. For example, Qin Meng and the Yen Emperor only slowed down after the 10th floor. After killing the bronze statue, Chu Fengmian's figure flickered and came to a new secret room. On the 2nd floor of the martial pagoda, there was still the same bronze statue in front of him. Chu Fengmian slashed with his iron sword. This bronze statue was also cut in half by Chu Fengmian. It couldn't resist at all. However, Chu Fengmian could see that this bronze statue's martial arts level had already reached the peak of the bone-tempering realm and the peak of the body-refining realm. It seemed that Chu Fengmian's guess was right. The bronze statues on the first few floors were easy to deal with. However, the further they went, the more difficult it became. The 3rd floor, the 4th floor, the 5th floor. They were the bronze statues of the Divine Sea Realm, Wind-Controlling Realm, and Divine Power Realm. They were easily killed by Chu Fengmian. Soon, Chu Fengmian came to the 10th floor. Chu Fengmian could already tell that the bronze man at the 10th level had a decent understanding of the martial way. He was already at the level of an early ancient emperor. Usually, Emperor Gu, who had just stepped into the Emperor Gu realm, would have this level of martial arts understanding. Sword. Chu Fengmian held his iron sword and took a step forward. The shadow of the sword flickered. Soon, the bronze statue fell in front of Chu Fengmian. The 11th floor was the level of the 7 tribulations Emperor Gu. Chu Fengmian still defeated it with his spiritual sword. The 12th floor was the level of the 8 tribulations Emperor Gu. It wasn't as easy for Chu Fengmian to deal with this bronze statue. It took him a few minutes to defeat the bronze statue in front of him. Next was the 13th floor. The bronze statue in front of him had reached the level of the 8 tribulations Emperor Gu. It was almost at the level of the blood god Emperor Gu. The Yen Emperor was defeated on this floor. Come on. The corners of Chu Fengmian's mouth curved into a smile. At this point, he was finally serious. Although Chu Fengmian had lost his strength, he wasn't unfamiliar with the swordsmanship at all. In his previous life, he didn't even reach the first level of the bone-tempering realm, but he could still comprehend the way of the sword. This wasn't difficult for Chu Fengmian at all. Boom! As Chu Fengmian's sword fell on the bronze statue's head, it fell to the ground with a thud. He passed the 13th floor. Next was the 14th floor. The martial arts contained in the bronze statue on the 14th floor was completely different from that of the 13th floor. The 9 tribulations Emperor Gu's level of martial arts understanding. Although it had just reached the level of the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu, it was completely different from the 8 tribulations Emperor Gu. Qing Meng had been defeated on this floor. The 9 tribulations Emperor Gu's level of martial arts. Let's fight. Chu Fengmian's eyes were full of fighting spirit. If he were to fight the real 9 tribulations Emperor Gu, Chu Fengmian was far from having the strength to do so. But in terms of martial arts understanding, Chu Fengmian wasn't afraid at all. The only difference between him and Emperor Gu was in the realm of strength. Chu Fengmian could contend with the blood god Emperor Gu. This was enough to prove that Chu Fengmian had completely surpassed the blood god Emperor Gu in terms of martial arts. Chu Fengmian was confident that he could fight the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu. The 14th floor. What a fast speed! Qing Meng and Emperor Yen both stared at the martial pagoda. Chu Fengmian's climbing speed was much faster than the two of them. In less than half the time Qing Meng took, he had already reached the 14th floor. My junior brother is really a monster. He has so many miraculous encounters. He even has such a heaven-defying understanding of martial arts. Qing Meng thought to herself. At the same time, she was also glad. Fortunately, she had asked Luo Kong to find Chu Fengmian and bring him to the Holy Dragon sect. Otherwise, such a monster would have been snatched away by others. Chapter 1403. The speed has finally slowed down. The 14th floor of the martial pagoda still hadn't been lit up after half an hour. It seemed to be in a stalemate. This made the Yen Emperor breathe a sigh of relief. The birth of a peerless genius was definitely not something he wanted to see, especially when Chu Fengmian was just a quasi-emperor. The gap between a quasi-emperor and an emperor realm master was extremely huge. In fact, a quasi-emperor could only control a part of an emperor realm master's power. Therefore, someone who could contend with the 7 tribulations Emperor Gu in the quasi-emperor realm and become an Emperor Gu in one step was enough to be called a peerless genius. And now, Chu Fengmian had already reached the 14th floor of the martial pagoda. In terms of martial Dao comprehension, he was already not inferior to Qing Meng. With such a terrifying martial Dao comprehension, the moment Chu Fengmian stepped into the Emperor realm in the future would be an earth-shattering moment. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he would reach the heavens in one step. Boom! Just as the Yen Emperor was secretly thinking in his heart, a wave of spirit energy vibrated out. The 14th floor of the martial pagoda was completely lit up. He actually passed the 14th floor? The Yen Emperor was stunned as he looked at the martial pagoda. When Chu Fengmian was on the 14th floor, he fought fiercely with this bronze man for a long time. Chu Fengmian carefully studied the martial Dao comprehension of the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu so that he could have some experience when fighting against the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu in the future. After carefully studying for a while, Chu Fengmian displayed his true sword skills and directly killed this bronze man. The 15th floor. The bronze man in front of him was still at the level of the 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu, but in terms of strength, it was much stronger than the one on the 14th floor. The 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu was the realm with the biggest gap in the Emperor realm. Among the 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu, there were existences who could contend against heaven beings and even kill them. When facing an ordinary 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu, they could fight against 100. Therefore, this 15th floor bronze man was still at the level of the 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu, but it was much stronger than the one on the 14th floor. However, Chu Fengmian was still fearless. He displayed his swordsmanship and fought fiercely with the bronze man. Even Chu Fengmian himself wasn't sure what level his swordsmanship had reached. The current Chu Fengmian's swordsmanship was much higher than his attainments in his previous life. Especially after obtaining the 3 sword principal totems, Chu Fengmian obtained the incomplete swordsmanship from the 3 sword principal totems. This further improved Chu Fengmian's understanding of sword principle. In less than 10 minutes, the bronze statue was defeated by Chu Fengmian again. Level 15 cleared. Chu Fengmian stepped onto the 16th floor. The Yen Emperor stared at the martial pagoda in shock. His mouth was wide open, and he couldn't say a word. Qing Meng was the same. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. He passed the 15th floor just like that? One must know that even the peerless Emperor Gu, Qing Meng, had only reached the 13th level. The Yen Emperor could be considered a world-renowned expert, but he had only reached the 12th level. At the 14th floor, Chu Fengmian was in a stalemate. Both of them thought that Chu Fengmian was about to reach his limit. However, they didn't expect that the 15th floor couldn't stop Chu Fengmian and was easily defeated by Chu Fengmian in 10 minutes. This is too terrifying. In the entire Daluo star field, you can't find such a monstrous genius. This kid is so young, where did he get such a deep understanding of martial Dao? The Yen Emperor muttered to himself in disbelief. Martial Dao comprehension, talent, and time were all indispensable. There were only a few people who could reach the heavens in a single step. The older the Emperor Gu was, the higher the level of martial Dao comprehension. The Yen Emperor could see that Chu Fengmian was definitely less than 100 years old. He was considered extremely young among the quasi-emperors. How could he have such a high level of martial Dao comprehension? Even Yun Zun wasn't this terrifying in the past. The Yen Emperor muttered to himself. In his memory, even Yun Zun, who was known as the #1 genius of the Daluo star field and the #1 emperor of all times, wasn't this terrifying. Boom! Just as the Yen Emperor was muttering to himself, another roar rang out. Spiritual energy burst out and turned into a ray of light, lighting up the 16th floor. The 16th floor passed. There was a flash of fear in the Yen Emperor's eyes. Such a character must never be an enemy. With Chu Fengmian's talent, it would be easy for him to step into the Emperor realm. Once he stepped into the Emperor realm, with Chu Fengmian's talent, it wouldn't be a problem for him to become the peerless Emperor Gu. At that time, he would be matched with this level of martial Dao. 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu? They were far from being able to compete with Chu Fengmian. As for Qing Meng, she was even more amazed. She was a genius herself. When she was a quasi-emperor, she was ranked first on the Daluo genius list. Few people in the entire Daluo star field could compete with her. But now, Chu Fengmian's performance was much more monstrous than when she was a quasi-emperor. I don't know if Junior Brother is comparable to those monsters in the Holy Land. However, those monsters have been nurtured by the Holy Land and received the inheritance. Junior Brother may not be inferior to them. Qing Meng whispered to herself. The Yen Emperor and Qing Meng stared at the martial Dao tower, afraid that they would miss a scene. Boom! A familiar sound. The 17th floor was lit up again. The 17th floor of the martial Dao tower passed. The 18th floor. In front of Chu Fengmian was still the same bronze statue. But this bronze statue was enough to bring great pressure to Chu Fengmian just by looking at it. Every move of the bronze statue contained the ultimate martial Tao. It was like the incarnation of martial Tao. It had reached the peak of the Emperor realm. The peak of the Nine Tribulation Emperor Gu. Chu Fengmian could see that the bronze statue's martial Tao comprehension should be at the peak of the Nine Tribulation Emperor Gu. Unless it touched the heaven realm and became a half-step heaven realm master, such martial Tao was already at the peak of the Emperor realm. If Chu Fengmian faced such a master, he would be killed in an instant. However, Chu Fengmian wasn't afraid of competing in martial Tao. His sword was invincible. Come. Chu Fengmian looked at the bronze statue as if he was looking at an ordinary opponent. Holding the iron sword, he rushed up. The power of the sword tore the space apart. Sword chi filled the sky and swept out. The sword chi that filled the sky wasn't formed by spirit energy, but pure sword intent. Chu Fengmian's sword Tao had reached the level of sword chi condensation. With just this sword intent, even if he encountered a divine power realm or life and death realm cultivator, he could directly kill them. Although he had touched the level of sword chi condensation in his previous life, he was far from being as mature as he was now. Only the great accomplishment Sword God Realm's Sword Tao was worthy of the title Sword God Realm. Boom! The bronze statue wasn't to be outdone. Its every move was like a martial god. Facing the sword chi that filled the sky, it punched out. Chapter 1404. Rumble. The bronze man punched out with an irresistible force, shattering all the sword chi in the sky. But at the same time, the countless sword chi also exhausted the martial arts of the punch. After one move, the result was a draw. Again. Chu Fengmian laughed and stepped forward with the iron sword in his hand. Chu Fengmian's sword intent was above the iron sword in his hand. This ordinary iron sword, under the sword intent, was more powerful than an ordinary heaven-level spiritual weapon. Void Slash. Although there was no spiritual power, Chu Fengmian could use his sword intent to perform swordsmanship. In an instant, the sword light slashed on the bronze man, and the battle was fierce again. Move by move, they kept colliding. Destroy! After half an hour, Chu Fengmian understood all the martial arts of the bronze man, and the sword light suddenly became huge. It turned into a 10,000-meter-long sword light and landed on the body of the bronze man. With a single slash, the bronze statue before him was shattered into pieces by the sword light. The 18th floor was broken through. Outside the martial arts pagoda, Emperor Yen and Qingmeng were shocked to see the 18th floor lit up. There were only 21 floors in the martial arts pagoda, and Chu Fengmian had now reached the 19th floor. Could it be that this person wants to reach the sky? Emperor Yen muttered to himself. He had just entered the martial arts pagoda, so he naturally knew the difficulty of the martial arts pagoda. He was defeated on the 13th floor. Now, Chu Fengmian had reached the 19th floor in one go, and he was still unstoppable. Emperor Yen was shocked, but he also made a decision. I can't be an enemy of this person. This person is too terrifying. He has a great chance to become a celestial being in the future. Emperor Yen was also very glad that he didn't provoke Chu Fengmian. Otherwise, it would be a nightmare to be an enemy of an enemy like Chu Fengmian. The 19th floor. Chu Fengmian came to the 19th floor, and in front of him was still the bronze man. But the bronze man in front of him made Chu Fengmian feel a great pressure in his heart just by looking at it. Even the martial arts of the heavens seemed to be controlled by this bronze man. He was the embodiment of martial art. Half-step diviner. The 18th level of the bronze statue already contained the comprehension of the peak martial Tao of the Emperor realm. As for the 19th level, it was the level of half-deva, which was only one step away from the Deva realm. It should be said that the half-step celestial realm was actually the name given to some of the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu, who had mastered a part of the celestial realm's power. Half-step Deva realm was already beyond the scope of the Emperor realm, and was closer to the heaven realm. The 19th floor is already half a step into the celestial being realm. What's on the 20th floor? A real celestial being? What about the 21st floor? Looking at the bronze statue, Chu Fengmian sighed inwardly. This martial Dao pagoda's difficulty was even higher than he imagined. Chu Fengmian had never encountered a half-step Deva being before. Now, he had to comprehend the martial path of a half-step Deva being in this martial pagoda. However, Chu Fengmian was still confident in this battle. He had killed his way up, and still had many trump cards that he had yet to use. Sword out. Whoosh! The iron sword condensed in Chu Fengmian's hand. Chu Fengmian took a step forward and aimed the sword at the bronze man's chest. Boom! The moment Chu Fengmian drew his sword, the bronze man suddenly moved. His fist was aimed at Chu Fengmian and blasted out. Chu Fengmian felt an unparalleled pressure the moment he was locked onto by the fist wind. He even felt that his body was being suppressed by a force. The power of this punch was about to crush Chu Fengmian alive. A casual move is enough to mobilize the power of heaven and earth? Chu Fengmian felt the pressure on his body and his face changed. Chu Fengmian had never come into contact with the power of the heaven realm. He had only heard about it in ancient books. Now, the moment he fought with this bronze man, Chu Fengmian understood the power of the heaven realm. With a wave of his hand, he could mobilize the power of heaven and earth. Although an Emperor Realm Master could mobilize the power of heaven and earth, he still relied on the world principles in his body. Once one's martial path reached the level of half-step Deva being, he didn't need any spirit power or world principles. His every move represented the power of heaven and earth. This ordinary punch was much stronger than a transcendent heaven-class martial skill. Martial skills that could mobilize the power of heaven and earth were the best among the heaven realm martial skills. Once one's martial path reached the level of half-step Deva being, he could reach such power with a wave of his hand. No wonder the martial skills created by Deva being were called immortal skills. Now, this casual blow had such terrifying power. This was indeed a power that was completely different from that of an Emperor Realm Master. Boom! Chu Fengmian's sword was shattered under the bombardment of this punch. In the face of the bronze man at the peak of the Emperor Realm, Chu Fengmian could easily defeat him, but in the face of this bronze man at the level of half-step Deva being, Chu Fengmian fell into a disadvantage in an instant. After the power of this punch shattered Chu Fengmian's sword, it went straight for Chu Fengmian's body. It didn't intend to give Chu Fengmian any chance to kill him. It seems that I can't hold back anymore. Chu Fengmian instantly understood in his mind that if he kept holding back his strength, he would only be defeated. 9 domains. Chu Fengmian muttered silently, and the sword intent on his body suddenly changed. 9 domains swordsmanship. The swordsmanship created by Chu Fengmian was also Chu Fengmian's strongest swordsmanship. It represented the highest attainments of Chu Fengmian's sword Dao. Chu Fengmian hadn't used the 9 domains swordsmanship before because he wanted to see how far his attainments in sword Dao had reached. Without using the 9 domains swordsmanship, the peak of the Emperor Realm was the limit. This was also the limit that ordinary martial artists and demon gods could reach. However, it wasn't that there were no monsters who could comprehend Deva being martial Dao at the Emperor Realm. The 9 Mystic Celestial Senior was one of them. He could kill a Deva being when he was Emperor Gu of the 9 Tribulations. In terms of martial Dao comprehension, he had probably reached the Deva being realm. Even among the experts in the Celestial Realm, his martial arts were among the best. An Emperor Realm Master comprehended Deva being martial Dao at the Deva being realm. If the 9 Mystic Celestial Senior could do it, so could Chu Fengmian. Sword out. Tide shift. Boom! Chu Fengmian pointed the tip of his sword and suddenly drew his sword. The moment he drew his sword, the aura on his body suddenly changed, like a mountain rising from the ground. Thousands of sword intents soared into the sky from Chu Fengmian's body. At this moment, Chu Fengmian was like the incarnation of Sword Dao. Wherever the tip of the sword passed, the martial Dao was shattered. Even the bronze man was forced back a few steps. Under this sword, the martial Dao of a half-step Deva being couldn't withstand it. Chapter 1405. Level 19 Breakthrough. Most of the martial path pagoda was lit up. Only the last two levels were still dark. As long as Chu Fengmian broke through the last two levels, he would be able to pass the martial path pagoda. The martial path pagoda was set up by the 9 mystic celestial sovereign. There must be a purpose behind it. Chu Fengmian felt that the martial path pagoda was more like a test for the 9 mystic celestial sovereign. In order to obtain the treasures of the 9 mystic celestial sovereign, one must have the opportunity and strength. If the token needed to enter the cave mansion was an opportunity, then the martial path pagoda was a test of strength. Qing Meng and Emperor Yin had obtained great benefits from the martial path pagoda. Chu Fengmian felt that once he passed the 21st level of the martial path pagoda, he would obtain an unparalleled opportunity. The 20th level. Chu Fengmian took a step forward and arrived at the 20th level. The 20th level was no longer a secret chamber, but a star field. Chu Fengmian was now in the sea of stars. In front of him, there was still the familiar bronze man. The bronze man seemed to have merged with the surrounding stars. He was this part of the world. Celestial realm. Chu Fengmian sized up the bronze man in front of him and understood his martial attainments. Celestial realm, the real celestial realm. It was very different from the half-step celestial realm. The half-step celestial realm could only control a part of the power of the celestial realm. The bronze man in front of him was the real celestial realm. The 20th level was much more difficult than the 19th level. It was 10 times more difficult. Chu Fengmian's eyes were cold. The 9 mystic celestial sovereign really thought highly of these challengers. The bronze man on the 20th level had the martial attainment of the celestial realm. What was on the 21st level? Beyond the celestial realm? Perhaps even Chu Fengmian couldn't imagine what level it was. However, there was no way out. Chu Fengmian also wanted to see what was hidden on the 21st floor. Chu Fengmian looked at the bronze man. After defeating the bronze man, Chu Fengmian could enter the 21st level of the martial path pagoda. Come, let's fight. The fighting will in Chu Fengmian's eyes was boiling. What he wanted to walk was the path of invincibility. He would be invincible all the way. Even those in the celestial realm could not make Chu Fengmian shrink back. Boom! The sword in Chu Fengmian's hand moved. The power of the 9 realms sword technique was infused into the sword and thousands of sword chi soared into the sky. Each of these sword chi was a swordsmanship that Chu Fengmian had obtained. Thousands of sword chi combined in the air to form an absolute killing move. This was Chu Fengmian's current 9 regions swordsmanship. It was also his strongest move, his limit. Destroy. Boom. Tens of thousands of sword chi enveloped the bronze figure, shattering the surrounding galaxy. The bronze man was not to be outdone. The moment he attacked, Chu Fengmian felt a familiar power. The power of heaven and earth. However, the power of heaven and earth of this bronze man was much more terrifying than that of the half-step celestial realm on the 19th floor. The complete power of a celestial being. Crack! With one punch, thousands of sword chi were shattered. Even in the face of countless sword chi, the bronze man still pressed forward. The ultimate martial path was also the path of invincibility. It looked down on everything and destroyed everything. The power collided again and again. Chu Fengmian didn't stop. He unleashed all his swordsmanship and slashed at the bronze statue one by one. However, none of the swordsmanship could really hurt the bronze man. It was a stalemate. Time and time again, The collision of power destroyed the surrounding galaxy, turning it into countless fragments. Is this the martial path of the celestial realm? This was the first time Chu Fengmian felt that his sword Dao was in a stalemate with his opponent after being bombarded again and again. Since Chu Fengmian's rebirth, although he had fought countless experts, his sword path had always been invincible. No expert's martial path could compete with Chu Fengmian's sword path. Because of this, Chu Fengmian had the capital to challenge those of a higher level. Even the blood god Emperor Gu was suppressed by Chu Fengmian in martial path. But this time, Chu Fengmian's sword path could not gain the slightest advantage in the face of the bronze man. Chu Fengmian was looking for an opportunity to strike again and again. However, this bronze man's martial Dao was simply unassailable, without the slightest bit of flaw. No matter how Chu Fengmian attacked, he could not break the bronze man's martial path. It was like an invincible defense. Invincible defense? There has never been an invincible defense in the world. Chu Fengmian's eyes were full of fighting spirit. Chu Fengmian had reached this point. He must go on. The bronze man could not stop Chu Fengmian. Sword. Chu Fengmian's sword intent condensed on the edge of his sword. He stabbed at the bronze man. Chu Fengmian's sword path was at its peak. All of his sword intent was shrouded under this sword. This sword was to determine the winner and the loser. There was no possibility of a stalemate. Boom. The bronze man also felt the power of this sword. He displayed his martial path at the same time. The bronze man's body was shrouded by a shadow. The martial god had descended. This was the true martial god, the embodiment of the martial path of heaven and earth. Where the tip of the sword pointed, it was invincible. The tip of the sword was the sharpest blade in the world. The bronze man's martial path was an invincible defense. Crack. The tip of the sword pierced directly into the martial god's shadow. The terrifying martial path wanted to crush the tip of the sword. However, the power of the tip of the sword also wanted to tear the martial path shadow apart. This was truly a lose-lose situation. No matter which side won, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. However, Chu Fengmian had no other choice. He could only stake it all on this one throw. Annihilation. Boom. The tip of the sword whistled past the martial god's shadow. The sword soared into the sky and cut a huge crack on the martial god's shadow. The crack on the martial god's shadow was completely destroyed by the sword chi on the tip of the sword. It was torn apart in an instant. At the same time, more than half of Chu Fengmian's sword was shattered. Under the pressure of the martial path, the sword light was reduced to a size of 3 inches. However, this was enough. Without the protection of the martial god's shadow, the bronze man stood naked in front of the sword. Die! The powerful sword tip pierced into the bronze man. In an instant, the bronze man's body was destroyed by the sword chi and shattered into pieces. Almost at the same time, the power of the sword tip was completely exhausted and shattered. Both sides suffered. However, Chu Fengmian was a step faster. The bronze man slowly disappeared. Chu Fengmian felt the world spinning in front of him as he arrived at the last floor. Chapter 1406. On the 21st floor. On the top floor of the martial pagoda. Only the last floor of the martial pagoda was not lit up. Chu Fengmian would pass the martial pagoda if he won this floor. Chu Fengmian was not sure if he could pass this floor. Chu Fengmian had already done his best when he was fighting on the 20th floor. He even used moves that would injure both of them. The outcome was only a hair's breadth away. Chu Fengmian had no chance of winning on the 21st floor if it was a little stronger. However, since he was here, there was no retreat. Chu Fengmian had to give it his all no matter what. Chu Fengmian glanced at the 21st floor. It was also a sea of stars. However, it was much wider than the 20th floor. At a glance, there were millions of stars in the sky. Among the tens of millions of stars, 9 of them were the brightest. Like a myriad of stars surrounding the moon, they stood above the tens of millions of stars. However, This time, there was no bronze man. Isn't this the 21st floor supposed to fight the bronze man? Chu Fengmian frowned. At this moment, the 9 stars among the millions of stars suddenly shot out 9 rays of light, landing in front of Chu Fengmian. A figure slowly walked out from within the 9 rays of light. It was a middle-aged man in a long robe. Thousands of stars were engraved on the robe, which could only be turned into his clothes. He slowly walked out from the 9 stars, as if he was the ruler of the 9 stars. I didn't expect that after hundreds of thousands of years, someone would actually step into the 21st floor. The middle-aged man looked at Chu Fengmian. Under his gaze, all of Chu Fengmian's trump cards were seen through. Quasi-Emperor. Interesting. Among the sovereigns in the world, no one could come to the 21st floor. I didn't expect a quasi-emperor to come. No matter how Chu Fengmian resisted, he could not stop the middle-aged man's gaze. The gap in strength had reached a point where Chu Fengmian could not fight back. Celestial Realm. This was definitely the strength of a Celestial Realm expert. Chu Fengmian could roughly guess the identity of the middle-aged man in front of him. The 9 Mystic Celestial Sovereign. Only the 9 Mystic Celestial Sovereign could appear on the 21st floor of the Martial Pagoda. Greetings, Celestial Sovereign. Chu Fengmian looked at the 9 Mystic Celestial Sovereign and said. Facing an immortal venerable, Chu Fengmian had to maintain his respect. Little guy, you're also here for my 9 Mystic Immortal Art, right? Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, the 9 Mystic Immortal Venerable didn't refute the way Chu Fengmian addressed him. This already proved his identity. Only the 9 Mystic Celestial Venerables could shake the galaxy. Initially, I set up this martial pagoda to give the future generations a chance. As long as they can pass the 21st floor of the martial pagoda, they will be able to obtain my 9 mysterious immortal art. Unfortunately, for hundreds of thousands of years, no one has been able to come here. The 9 Mystic Celestial Venerable muttered to himself. Who would have thought that at this moment when the martial way is in decline, when a strand of my power is about to dissipate, someone would actually come. Little guy, if you want the 9 Mystic Immortal Art, I can give it to you. I can even give you all the treasures in this cave. As long as you pass my test, they will all belong to you. The 9 Mystic Celestial Sovereign looked at Chu Fengmian and said with a smile. Let's not keep you in suspense. My test is the 21st floor of the Martial Pagoda. If you can pass the Martial Pagoda, you will pass the test. The opponent on the 21st floor of the Martial Pagoda is me. If you can defeat me, you will pass the test. Defeat you? Although Chu Fengmian had already guessed his opponent on the 21st floor of the Martial Pagoda, he was still shocked when he heard the 9 Mystic Celestial Venerable say it out loud. The person in front of him was the 9 Mystic Celestial Venerable, who was considered an invincible expert in the heavenly human realm. Although the real 9 Mystic Celestial Venerable had already fallen, Chu Fengmian could tell that the 9 Mystic Celestial Venerable in front of him should be a remnant of his power. However, the remnant of his power had the strength of a heavenly human realm expert. How could the current Chu Fengmian fight with a heavenly human realm expert? How was that possible? That's right. Defeat me. The 9 Mystic Celestial Venerable nodded. Of course, I won't use my spiritual power. You and I will compete with our martial Tao attainment. I will use my martial Tao when I was Emperor Gu of the 9 Tribulations to fight with you. However, little guy, you must be careful. When I was Emperor Gu of the 9 Tribulations, I had already created the 9 Mystic Immortal Art. Although it's not the complete 9 Mystic Immortal Art, it's enough to kill a heavenly human realm expert. The 9 Mystic Celestial Venerable said indifferently. I have seen your swordsmanship. To be honest, when I was a quasi-emperor, I didn't have such comprehension of martial Tao. However, rules are rules. Whether you are a quasi-emperor or a 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu, I will fight with the 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu of the 9 Tribulations. Chu Fengmian listened to everything quietly. The opponent on the 21st floor of the martial pagoda was no longer the bronze man, but the martial Tao of the Nine Tribulations, Emperor Gu of the Nine Tribulations. The Nine Mystic Immortal Art was created by the Nine Mystic Celestial Venerable when he was Emperor Gu of the Nine Tribulations. At that time, the Nine Mystic Immortal Art was not complete, but it was enough to kill a heavenly human realm expert. This also meant that Chu Fengmian was now facing the famous Nine Mystic Immortal Art. Come on. Chu Fengmian looked at the Nine Mystic Celestial Venerable and said with a smile. It was worth it for him to come to the 21st floor. Today, he would like to experience the famous Nine Mystic Immortal Art. Not bad. You have some fighting spirit. The Nine Mystic Celestial Venerable looked at Chu Fengmian with admiration. Little brat, if you had stepped into the Emperor realm, I'm afraid that passing this assessment would be a piece of cake. But today you are just a quasi-emperor. I have already seen your sword Tao. If this is your strongest martial Tao, then you will definitely lose this battle. The battle has not started yet. It is hard to tell who will win. When Chu Fengmian heard the Nine Mystic Celestial Venerable's words, he knew that the 20th floor of the martial Tao was only for the heavenly human realm experts. When the Nine Mystic Celestial Venerable was still Emperor Gu of the Nine Tribulations, he had created the Nine Mystic Immortal Art, which was able to kill a heavenly human realm expert. His martial Tao attainment was even more terrifying than a heavenly human realm expert. However, no matter what, Chu Fengmian had to give it his all in this battle. Chu Fengmian had never admitted defeat. Not in the past, not today. Alright, little guy. Let's see if you have the ability to do so. The Nine Mystic Celestial Venerable laughed. I hope that you can defeat me. As you wish. Chu Fengmian laughed and attacked. A towering sword intent shrouded his body. He turned his body into a sword and turned into a sword Tao. Thousands of sword techniques were shot out in an instant. They intertwined and turned into a huge golden sword, covering the Nine Mystic Celestial Venerable's head. Chapter 1407. This was a new move that Chu Fengmian had comprehended. It was called Golden Jian Zhanxian. It was called Immortal Slaying, which meant that Chu Fengmian was going to defeat the Nine Mystic Celestial Sovereign. The Nine Mystic Celestial Sovereign was an immortal, and Chu Fengmian was going to slay him today. Interesting. You managed to make a breakthrough in your sword skills in such a short period of time. Your talent is absolutely heaven-defying. If I'm still alive, I'd like to have a spar with you. The Nine Mystic Celestial Sovereign sighed when he saw the sword slashing towards him. The Nine Mystic Celestial Sovereign had witnessed the battle from the first level to the 20th level. Chu Fengmian had yet to use this move on the 20th level. In other words, Chu Fengmian had comprehended this move in such a short period of time. Come on. Looks like you're not completely powerless. The move that I'm going to use is the Nine Mystic Immortal Art. It's up to you whether you can survive the first 3 moves of the Nine Mystic Immortal Art. The Nine Mystic Celestial Sovereign said coldly. The Nine Mystic Immortal Art was the Nine Mystic Celestial Sovereign's signature move. The Nine Mystic Celestial Sovereign relied on the Nine Tribulations Emperor Gu to kill a heavenly being. The Nine Mystic Immortal Art had a total of 7 moves. The first 3 moves were created by the Nine Mystic Celestial Sovereign when he was the Emperor Gu. The last 4 moves were created by the Nine Mystic Celestial Sovereign after he stepped into the heavenly being realm. Although the Nine Mystic Celestial Sovereign had only used the first 3 moves, Chu Fengmian was still under great pressure. After all, the first 3 moves were enough to kill a heavenly being. Sword! Chu Fengmian roared. The power of the golden sword was condensed to the extreme, and it slashed towards the Nine Mystic Celestial Sovereign's shadow. The power of the sword was enough to destroy the heavens and earth. Nothing could be left behind by the sword. It was a killing move. First move. Greedy Wolf. As the tip of the sword neared, the Nine Mystic Celestial Venerate moved as well. With a flick of his palm, he sent a palm towards the golden longsword. The moment the nine mystic celestial sovereign made his move, the stars in the sky seemed to be under his control. The power of the stars continuously condensed. Was the nine mystic immortal art related to the Tao of stars? Chu Fengmian thought to himself. This was his first time seeing the nine mystic immortal technique. The Tao of stars was incomparably mysterious. The most mysterious Tao of stars in the nine regions was the divine pivot hall. However, Chu Fengmian had seen the Tao of stars of the heavenly pivot hall before. It was far from comparable to the nine profound immortal technique. No wonder he's called Jiu Xian. Chu Fengmian muttered to himself. Jiu Xian was obviously not the real name of the nine Xian celestial venerable. The two words Jiu Xian represented the starry sky of the universe and the endless galaxy. So what if you have the power of the endless Milky Way? If you make me your enemy, I'll tear this galaxy apart. Chu Fengmian roared fearlessly. His sword was aimed at the nine mystic immortal venerable. Boom! The nine mystic celestial venerate's star energy was condensed to the maximum in his hands. Suddenly, he made a move and grabbed the incoming sword with his palm. The power of the stars clashed fiercely with the golden sword. Boom! Chu Fengmian's sword Tao clashed with the nine mystic immortal technique at the epicenter of the collision. The two forces were getting weaker and weaker. In the next moment, the golden sword shattered, and the power of the stars was completely exhausted. Not bad to be able to block one of my moves. The nine mystic celestial venerable looked at Chu Fengmian and praised him. However, if this is your full strength, you won't be able to block the next move. The second move, Giant Gate. As the nine mystic celestial venerable spoke, the sea of stars churned. The stars in the sky seemed to have become the source of the nine mystic celestial venerable's power. The stars in the sky were the power of the nine mystic celestial venerable. Every move of the nine mystic immortal technique was able to activate the stars. Boom! This time, the star energy in the nine mystic celestial venerable's palm turned into a long river. In the long river, one could see the stars in it. Each of the stars contained extreme power. In an instant, it came to Chu Fengmian's side and shrouded his body. Boom! 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 Every star in the long river bombarded Chu Fengmian's body. Without the protection of the divine tree, Chu Fengmian's body was extremely weak. Even a little bit of contact would cause him to fall. Break for me. Dual swords. The sword intent condensed into an iron sword in Chu Fengmian's palm. Chu Fengmian's sword Tao was the Tao of dual swords. He wielded the ancestral dragon's supreme sword and the titanic divine sword at the same time. After going through so many battles, the Tao of dual swords had long been engraved in Chu Fengmian's sword Tao. The dual sword's form was Chu Fengmian's strongest martial Tao. Break. The two swords intertwined with each other. The power condensed to the extreme and turned into a ray of sword qi facing the long river. The moment the sword qi hit the long river, Chu Fengmian felt that the stars in the long river were shattered by the power of the sword qi. The second form of the nine profound immortal art, Colossal Gate, was meant to envelop Chu Fengmian in the long river of stars and drown him with heavy power. But now, Chu Fengmian's two sword lights were incomparably sharp. The two sword lights were always able to find a flaw and create an opening, allowing Chu Fengmian to escape danger. This was a clash of pure martial Tao. It wasn't a clash of strength, but a true clash of martial Tao. Although Chu Fengmian was in a passive position, he wasn't really in danger once. The second form of the nine profound immortal art, Colossal Gate, was also useless against Chu Fengmian. Moreover, Chu Fengmian was studying the nine profound immortal art during these battles. Only by understanding it would one be able to see the flaws. The mysterious veil of the nine profound immortal art gradually lifted in Chu Fengmian's heart. If the nine profound immortal venerate can draw on the power of the stars, then I can too. Chu Fengmian was immersed in the nine profound immortal art. Every time his sword collided with the 9 profound immortal art, it was enough for Chu Fengmian to understand the 9 profound immortal art better. Although Chu Fengmian seemed to be in a difficult situation every time, he was getting more and more at ease now. The 9 profound immortal art might be able to be integrated into my swordsmanship. All martial Tao in the world is of the same origin. Chu Fengmian muttered to himself. He looked at the stars in the sky and suddenly soared up with his sword. Starfall! Boom! The stars in the sky seemed to have heard Chu Fengmian's call. A wave of star force immediately fell on Chu Fengmian. At the same time, a new chapter was being written in the ancient sword art book in Chu Fengmian's mind. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.